Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic part 1. Which is what if Naruto was stranded at sea with Ino and Temari part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Naruto's been on lots of missions before during his career as a shinobi, but none of them have ever started out like this. Stranded on a lifeboat, out in the middle of the ocean with no sign of land in sight. As far as the eye can see, it's just water, water and even more water. To say that Naruto hated sea storms was a monumental understatement now, given he didn't know how to navigate or even which direction to go. He was glad for the lifeboat shore so his luck wasn't entirely gone just yet, but it sure would have been nice if Jiraiya, Tsunade or anyone from Konoha had found him by now. Between the sun bearing down on him during the daytime or how freaking cold it got at night, Naruto was slowly, bit by bit, losing his mind and wishing he could be back in Konoha for a hot bowl of Ichiraku ramen. The good side was he wasn't alone. For the last few weeks now, he'd been sharing this boat with two people. One was his friend Ino Yamanaka from Team Asuma and the other his friend Gaara's older sister Temari. The storm that capsized their ship left all three of them on this lifeboat together. It actually all started when the 5 village leaders called for a new meeting between the 5 great villages and this time, Kiri was chosen and Mei Terumi, the 5th Mizukage was chosen to host it. Both the Konoha and Suna delegations traveled together on one large ship. One moment, Naruto was catching up with his friend Gaara over dinner and the next, there was this MIV storm the likes of which he'd never seen before. Naruto and his team, along with several others, were organized to get the civilians to safety first. Once they did get all the civilians safely below deck however, Naruto was thrown off the boat by a MIV wave that took him completely unaware. He was left struggling to remain above the water as waves kept trying to submerge him. Turns out that walking on water for ninja isn't as easy as you'd think when you're being tossed around by the sea like a rag doll. The poor guy thought he was gonna drown till he was hauled on board a lifeboat by both familiar kunoichi who he was stranded with right now. Turns out both of them were thrown overboard by the same wave that capsized Naruto. They watched in horror as the boat that had everyone on board flipped over and started to disappear beneath the dark waters. They had no idea if anyone was able to get off or what happened to their teams, friends or families. The rain would last well into the rest of the night and for the three of them, it was terrible. The bitter cold rain water on their skin while the wind blew over them had all three of them shivering. Temari had it the worst out of them. She was already having a hard time at sea, given she spent most of her life either in the desert or just on land in general. With the waves tossing and turning their little boat like babies with their toys in a bathtub, her seasickness was way worse. Naruto and Ino had to hold her so she wouldn't fall overboard while she vomited. Even after the waves and the storm calmed down, it was still raining pretty hard and the wind was still blowing an incredibly icy breeze over them. Their first night was extremely uncomfortable to say the least as they were soaked all the way through, hungry and thirsty. Naruto, Ino and Temari were all in the worst possible situation. They were stranded out in the middle of the ocean, neither of them knew how to navigate, where they were or even where to go. They had no food or fresh water, no way to keep rain water from falling on them so they could dry off and keep warm, no blankets or towels. The three of them were extremely miserable for the first night. It kept raining and by now, things were getting pretty desperate. Out of frustration, Temari looked over to Naruto with a very angry look in her eyes. Temari-san, Naruto asked nervously. Strip. She ordered. What? He freaked. Not sure he heard her right. You heard me, Uzumaki. Strip. She barked. She then looked over at Ino who couldn't believe it either. You too. She ordered. You cannot be serious, shouted her fellow blonde. Do you idiots want to freeze to death? She asked them in an irritated tone. Both of them were quiet as they shivered. The rain is starting to die down and soon, it should come to a stop but we're all soaking wet and it's getting colder. We need to share our body heat while we sleep or we'll catch hyperthermia, she told them. Both Naruto and Ino didn't think about that. They looked at one another first and then back to the Suna princess. It's part of basic survival training. This is even important in the desert. At night, the temperature can drop to freezing levels and can kill you just as easily as the intense heat can. she explained. Temari then sneezed, followed by Ino then Naruto. Now, both of you can leave your underwear on but take off everything else. We need to lay into one another to combine body heat, she finished. Even if this was a survival situation, it was still extremely awkward for all three of them to strip down in front of one another. Naruto wore a pair of black and orange boxer shorts with red swirly designs on them. Temari and Ino both wore basic training bras and panties, just different colors. Ino's were white and Temari's were dark gray. If sitting in front of one another in their underwear was extremely uncomfortable, then what came next was even more so. Temari decided to lay on her side first with her back to Naruto. Then she ordered him to lay down behind her and press his chest against her back. Naruto did so and also brought his arm around her waist to hold her close, which she allowed. He then felt Ino do the same, and soon, all three of them were huddled together and shivering as they waited for her plan to work. After a while, they stopped shivering and were feeling much warmer now. All three of them were so tired that it didn't take long at all for them to fall asleep, one after another. It was a bloody wonder that Ino or Temari didn't wake up from Naruto's snoring. Either they were both very heavy sleepers or they were too tired to care. The rest of the night would be cold but peaceful for the three of them as they huddled together to share body heat and try to make it through the night. Ino did wake up one time to take a piss, which was really hard to do without falling over the side of the boat for her, then would cuddle back with Naruto's back pressed up against her chest. Neither of the other two becoming even aware. Naruto would be the first to stir a bit when he felt the sun shining down on him and hitting his eyes. Naruto almost forgotten that he was sleeping with the two blonde kunoichi. He heard Temari's soft breathing as she slept and felt Ino's lightly tickling the back of his neck. He was calm until he felt an all too familiar sensation he felt some mornings, and to his horror, it was exactly what he feared. He had morning wood and feared for his life what these girls would do to him if they woke and found his with a boner because he was sleeping with them. He was frozen where he laid, praying he could bring himself under control before either of them woke up. He was silently panicking when Temari did stir when she felt him poking into her backside. Naruto, he heard her say very weakly. Sweat poured down his face as he readied himself for one hell of a beating. Naruto was scared out of his mind of Sakura sometimes, and he didn't want to get into trouble with either of these dangerous ladies. Would you mind readjusting? Your knee is pressing against my, she said before he heard her fall back to sleep. Naruto carefully, easily and very quietly got back up out from between both ladies and watched as Ino scooted over to cuddle with Temari for warmth. He then made his way over to the side of the boat to take a piss, and much to his relief, pun intended, his erection died back down and he was able to relax. He then changed back into his cloths, and soon, both of his boat mates would get up and get dressed back into their cloths as well. They were still damp, but the sun warmed them up and soon, they were comfortably dry again. Most of the day was actually very awkward between the three of them. They didn't really have a whole lot to talk about at all, given that they were lost at sea and just waiting for someone to come by and find them. They were also feeling hungry and thirsty too. And this was kind of the routine for them now for the last 5 days as they just floated out to sea. They'd sit in their own little corner of the boat as they waited, trying to pee the time with small talk and do their best to keep their minds off their growling stomachs. The average human body needed water every 3 days or they'd dehydrate. The only thing that saved them from that was when it would rain from time to time. When it did, all three of them would open their mouths to the sky and try to catch a mouthful of water. It wasn't as easy as one would think, given that the wind blew most of the water away, so little rain actually would fall into their waiting mouths. What made things even more frustrating was when it would only rain for like a couple of moments before it would stop and they'd be left with only a sip. Naruto and Ino watched as Temari went absolutely berserk over the short rain. She stood to her feet and yelled at the sky, giving it the bird and cursing it out before demanding that it would rain longer and with less wind. Then she'd sit back down on her from the dizziness due to the lack of food. After about 10 days, they were absolutely miserable. Naruto was sitting still where he usually did when his stomach growled loudly. "Will you shut the hell up?" shouted Ino, who shot to her feet when she heard Naruto's grumbling. "I didn't say anything," he cried back in defense. "Then stop your stomach from growling," she snapped. It's really getting on my nerves. She shouted. It's not my fault, Ino-san. He replied. I can't keep my stomach from growling when I'm hungry and I haven't eaten anything in nearly 2 weeks and I'm starving. He explained. Ino was about to yell again when she lost her balance and fell back down onto her corner of the boat. Naruto, I'm sorry. She said in a more calm and even apologetic tone. She then blushed when her stomach started growling too. I'm just so hungry right now and I can get pretty cranky when I haven't had anything to eat for too long, she told him. She then heard another growling and shot another dirty look, thinking that it was him again. Hey, don't look at me. He shouted in defense. That was my stomach, said Temari with a small blush of her own. All three of them right now were so hungry that they felt they could start eating their own cloths or part of the boat should it come to it. By 15 days, Ino and Temari were laying side by side in the center of the boat and just talking while Naruto was leaning against the side and watching the sea as they just continued floating further and further out to nowhere really. Hey Ino, Temari asked, looking straight up into the sky as she lay on her back. Yeah, asked Ino who also lay on her back but had her eyes closed. Did you ever think your life would end like this? Asked the Suna Kunoichi to her fellow blonde. Well, trapped with the village idiot was not what I was expecting, she replied, referring to Naruto. Guys, Naruto asked but was ignored. You know, I've been thinking about my brothers a lot for these last few weeks, she told her. Ino turned her head a bit to look at her. Really? She asked her. I may die out here, said Temari sadly. I may never see them again, she sniffed. Don't say that, Temari, said Ino. Things look bad, but I'm sure your brothers are looking for you. The cage won't abandon his older sister, she told her, trying to rear. I know you're right, said Temari, wiping a tear from her cheek. But it's been 15 days and the only hope we ever get is when it rains so we can get a drink of water, she said, sniffing again. I was such a bitch sometimes. She cried a bit. Temari, said Ino, feeling bad for her. I mean it, she replied. I'm bossy, I'm short-tempered and so entitled sometimes. I know I shouldn't be, but I've spent so long being the cage's daughter, that I forget sometimes what it feels like to just be a sister to her brothers, she cried. I don't even tell Konkuro or Gaara that I love them as much as I should, she added. Guys, asked Naruto again, only for the two ladies to ignore him again. Temari then looked over to Ino who was looking at her. What about you, family? She asked her. Ino looked back up at the sky, watching the gulls flying by but not really paying much attention. Mom and Dad, she answered. No siblings, she asked her. No, I'm an only child, replied Ino. And if anyone among us should feel guilty about how they've treated family, it's me. I was such a little brat sometimes. I gave Mom a hard time whenever I could, even over the simplest requests, and I treated Dad like dirt as I got older and older. I know he probably spent too much time drinking than he really should have, and that got on Mom's nerves too, but most of the time I was just giving him a hard time, she told her, starting to feel badly about it. I didn't say I love you to my parents as much as I should have either, she confessed, feeling a tear well up in her eye. You're the daughter of a clan leader, Ino. Most girls turn out as brats when they're born into nobility. Temari told her. Ino scoffed at that. Hardly an excuse, she replied. I know my parents. They'd give life and limb for my, and I show no gratitude for it at all, she told her. Guys, Naruto asked a third time. This time they'd look up at him then back to the sky when he didn't look back at them. It was then a thought came to Temari. Does Naruto have any family back home? She asked her. I've been to Konoha over the years but I don't ever remember seeing them, she confessed. Ino wasn't expecting her fellow blonde to ask about him. Naruto's an orphan, she replied. I met him when we first entered the academy and I think he's always been alone, she told her. Temari looked over at Ino again. No family at all, she asked. Ino shook her head and shrugged her shoulders. None that I know of, she confessed. The Uzumaki clan died out at the end of the Third Ninja World War. As far as we know, he's the last of them, she told her. This really made Temari think. You know, he's in the same boat as we are, she said with a brief grin. Both figuratively and literally. She chuckled, only for her grin to drop. Do you, Think anybody will miss him when he dies? She asked. That also had Ino really thinking. She knew that Naruto had it rough growing up and it must have been really lonely to grow up without parents. I don't know. She confessed. To be honest, I've never really thought about Naruto's personal life. We're on different teams and we don't hang out as much as we do with the other people we know, she told her. Ino then looked back to Temari. What do you think of him? She asked her. I've never spent this much time with him before I've had to now, but truth be told, I never really thought too much about him, she told her. We meet from time to time, like when either I visit Konoha or he visits Suna, but we really don't talk to each other that much. However, Gaara is very fond of him, she told her. Even before Naruto saved him from the Akatsuki, he'd always held him in such high regards. Whenever Naruto would come to visit our village, whether it's a mission or it's personal, Gaara's always happy to see him and he's always ready to welcome him with open arms, she told her. Ino was really surprised to hear that. I had no clue, she confessed. Temari smiled and nodded. Naruto doesn't know this, but ever since he saved Gaara he's become quite famous in Suna, she told her. Ino smiled at that. She thought it was nice that he was getting some recognition for all his hard work. It also made her a little sad. He was treated like dirt a lot of times back home, so it's sad to think he can find the most acceptance in other villages like Suna. Guys! Shouted Naruto loudly and very excitedly. What? Shouted both Kunoichi, who shot up in irritation from him constantly shouting at them. Land, he said with a bright smile and pointing. Both ladies' eyes shot wide open when they saw not far off now an actual island. Sandy shores and green trees in the distance. Temari rubbed her eyes and prayed it wasn't an illusion like a mirage. Ino was about to break down and start crying from seeing the island, and to her, it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. All three of them used their hands to row themselves over to the island, and once they were close, one of the waves flipped them over, so they had to swim to shore once they were about 20 feet from the sand. Temari and Ino were on their hands and knees as they crawled out of the water and onto the beach. They were so happy to feel land, even if it was sand, mind you. They rolled over onto their backs and made sand angels as they both laughed and cried from happiness. They then sat back up to see Naruto as energetic as ever and running, jumping and flipping up and down the beach. Do you think he drank the seawater? Temari asked Ino. No, he's always been like that, she replied, rolling her eyes. Temari felt some cool liquid against her lips, a little running down her cheek. Her eyes slowly opened to look up at Naruto, who was looking down at her with a really worried look on his face. She then opened her mouth and felt a funny yet familiar tasty liquid enter, bringing back some long-lost moisture to her mouth. That was when she realized that it was coconut water. She then sat up and took the half coconut from his hands to drink as much as she could. She only had coconut water one other time in her life, and although she didn't hate it, she really didn't think too much about it at all. Now, she never thought coconut water could taste so good and she wanted more. Once she had her drink, she looked back over to Naruto, who got up and ran over to Ino, who was laying down as well. She watched as he offered her a drink too. Within moments, Ino sat up to try and empty the coconut shell of the water inside of it just as she did moments ago. Once she had enough, she looked back to Naruto, who looked relieved that both girls seemed okay. What happened? Ino asked him. Right after we got off the boat and on the beach, you guys just fainted, he replied. I figured that you both must have been really thirsty, so I grabbed one of the coconuts in that tree over there to give you a drink, he explained, pointing to the coconut tree about 30 feet from them. Neither girl could believe that they couldn't remember Ping out. But then again, they weren't too surprised at the fact that they did either. Over the last few weeks, they were incredibly desperate for water while floating out in the middle of the ocean. It was even harder for Temari because of her seasickness. She'd spend the first few days throwing up a couple of times before she was able to adjust to the waves. But by then, she had already lost a lot of liquids, so she was more dehydrated than Naruto and Ino were. Because they didn't have any water bottles from the ship or clean water makers with them, they were entirely dependent on rainwater. Even if it did rain a couple of times every other day for them, they still weren't able to get the drink they needed as badly, so they were always thirsty. The hot sun didn't really help either. Naruto then brought out another coconut which he picked and then cracked in on a stone in front of him before splitting it in half. Here you go, he said, offering one half of it to each of the ladies he was with. Both blonde girls took the shells and started drinking the liquid inside with much eagerness. This is the best, said Ino, unaware of the little bit of water running down her chin. And I don't even like coconuts, she added. Just then, all three stomachs growled quite loudly, causing three different teens to blush bright red. We've gotta find something to eat, said Temari. All three of them spent a good 30 minutes scouring the area further from the beach and deeper into the jungle. To say that they three of them were hungry would have been a monumental understatement. After being stranded in a boat for 15 days with no food at all and only a couple of mouthfuls of rainwater every other day, it was a wonder that neither of them had lost their marbles and started killing and cannibalizing one another out of desperation for nourishment. Now they were on an island that was pretty damn big if it had a whole jungle on it. At this point, they were hoping to find anything to satisfy their need for food. If they could find some meat, that would be most preferable. Ninjas with their skill could easily kill an animal if it came to that. Hell, if they had the gear, they'd settle for catching fish. Hey guys, shouted Ino to Naruto and Temari. What? Asked the other blonde Kunoichi. Water, she replied. Naruto and Temari rushed over to Ino and sure enough, there was a stream of almost crystal clear water running down and collecting into a large pool then pouring out the end and down further into the jungle. All three ninja came the side and started cupping their hands together and bringing water up to their lips again and again. The coconut water Naruto got for them earlier was good, but the clean water was incredible. It was so cool and tasted so good. Each time they brought their hands to their lips to drink the water they had cupped, they felt like it was ages since they had such a cool and refreshing drink. Once they were done, all three of them sat back to catch their breaths. As they panted, Naruto looked up and then reached over to gently tap Temari's shoulder. She looked over to him and he pointed up. Just above them, they saw mangoes. The fruit was nice and ripe with its blend of red and yellow with orange in the middle. Naruto then jumped up to the top of tree and grabbed two of the fruits, one in each hand before dropping them into Ino and Temari's awaiting hands. Naruto then plucked one for himself and dropped down to the ground with the girls. Each of them bit into the mangoes and could hardly believe how good they tasted. All three of them were so hungry that they felt like this would be the last meal of their days before they died. All three of them eagerly, almost savagely consumed the rich and flavorful fruit in their hands. They even had a little of the juices leaking and dripping down their chins because they were eating them so fast, but right now, they didn't care. All they wanted was to eat. The three of them would spend a good 30 minutes feasting on the mangoes that Naruto would jump up and pick for them once they asked for another. By the time they were finished, there was a pile of the pits that were left over. They then took a few moments to relax and feel good from actually being able to enjoy something to eat for a change. Even if it was just one kind of fruit, it was the greatest thing they've ever eaten in their lives at that moment, and the fact that their stomachs were full and even hurt just a little bit, was just wonderful. Naruto then got up and walked away from the girls who still sat where they were. Where are you going? Asked Temari. Naruto stopped and turned back to her. I gotta take a leak, he answered. This made Ino stand up in response to that. Go to the beach and do that there, she told him. Naruto wasn't expecting that from her at all. Huh, why? He asked. I was gonna put some distance between all of us and just find a bush or a tree, he told her. Naruto, you need to think more carefully than that, replied Ino. Take a look at the pool, she said, pointing to the water that they were drinking from a half hour ago. What about it? He asked, not getting it. Ino rolled her eyes before answering. Naruto, we have no idea at all how big this island we're on now really is and if this is our only source of clean drinking water, she told him. We need to be careful about where we choose to answer nature's call, because we can't risk getting this water contaminated, she explained. Well, like I said, I was gonna find a bush or something far off. It's not like I was gonna piss in the water, he replied. Not intentionally, no, she retorted. But that doesn't mean you can't be careful at all about where you do your business, she told him. Ino's right, Naruto, said Temari, now standing to her feet. Do you have any idea how much trouble we'd be in if either of us got sick from drinking contaminated water? In ancient times, before chakra could be harnessed or used in combat and soldiers would lay siege to castles for months at a time, diseases could kill men more often than battles could because they weren't careful about where they dig their latrines, she told him. Exactly, replied Ino. The people inside of the castles would have the benefits of having a source of clean drinking water and a way to dispose of their waste. But the soldiers outside the castles didn't have the same luxuries as the people within. They'd have to get their water from wells, rivers, or an oasis, and it was very crucial that they kept that water clean. If men weren't careful about where they dug their latrines, the waste would flow right into the water they were supposed to be drinking, she told him, which caused Naruto to look at the water in the pool with some disgust at the idea of accidentally drinking his own urine. It's why you'd also have many soldiers getting sick and dying from illnesses like dysentery, cholera, or something else just as bad, she explained to him. Even if I do have great skills as a medic, I don't have any of the proper equipment to treat either of us if we get really sick, she continued. So from now on, we need to keep all that to the beach. It's not like we'd get sick if it flowed into the ocean because we're not drinking seawater, she finished. Yeah, okay, I see your point, Ino. Naruto replied while rubbing the back of his neck. He then turned and headed back towards the beach to do his business. After a while, all three teens met up again on the beach and decided that they were gonna work on a different chore for the remaining hours of daylight. Naruto was gonna work on trying to get a fire started so they could have a campsite and a place to keep warm later tonight. Naruto and two clones ran into the jungle to find some dry firewood and kindling as well as a means to start a fire. Each of them found a good-sized bundle of wood before returning to the beach with their bounties. Naruto would place the kindling down into a small pile before reaching into his satchel and pulling out some matches. It took him a couple of tries, but he got a small flame going. Then he started working to make the flame bigger by adding the larger wood to it. In no time at all, Naruto had a good-sized fire for the three of them. Ino decided to work on looking for more food. She doubted that coconuts and mangoes were gonna be enough for the three of them and wanted to find a wider range of food for them to eat. Naturally, she stopped first by the place where they found the mangoes and picked several dozen. She figured that she'd grab a dozen for each of them so that they'd have plenty to last a few days before they'd have to go out and grab some more. In her search for food, she also found a banana tree. This was good because bananas were an excellent source of fiber. The best part about harvesting bananas were that you do when they're still a dark green and they actually continue to ripen long after you pick them. Ino also found papayas, star fruits, pineapples, grapefruits, and many other tropical fruits. Now she just needed help carrying it. Lastly, Temari focused on searching for materials for a shelter. They were gonna need something to keep the rain off of them, and it would be nice to get out of the hot tropical sun as well. One of the benefits of being a Suna ninja was making shelters was something they taught to all their students in the Suna Academy. One of the problems she had was there wasn't any cloth for her to use for making a tent. Now she did notice that there were these miv leaves that she could use. If she could work on a decent-sized frame for a tent, she could use the leaves to substitute for the cloth and they could make a decent shelter. She also figured that they could be used for bedding. It would be ideal for them to sleep on something somewhat soft and dry rather than the sand on the beach. Now all she needed was help with it. Both girls would get the help they needed soon enough when a clone of Naruto would come to them both. They'd explain to both Kunoichi that he had already finished getting a fire going for their campsite, so he had some time to help them out. Both ladies were grateful for the ice dance with their chores that Naruto offered, and he was able to help them reduce the number of trips it would take to bring all their food and materials to the beach where the three of them would be staying. Temari was able to grab all the giant leaves she picked earlier, while Naruto's clone would carry the large logs for the frame of the shelters she wanted to build, while Ino was able to have a Naruto clone help her with carrying the miv bounty of fresh fruit. Both ladies were pleased to see that he would go out of his way for them. Both Temari and Ino arrived to the campsite on the beach right around the same time and watched as the Naruto clones would take the supplies they had to the spots that the girls told them where to take them. Both clones placed everything down on the sand before dispelling. That was when both blondes smelled something and they thought was great. They looked over to the fire and saw Naruto there with some actual fish on sticks, cooking over the flame. They made their way over to him and he turned to smile and greet them when he heard them coming. "Hey guys," he said with a grin. "What's up? Are you hungry?" he asked. "Where'd you get these?" asked Ino, looking at the fish who have already been flayed, gutted and deboned before having been placed on a long stick so it could rest over the fire and cook. "I caught 'em," he said with his big foxy grin. "How?" asked Temari, who was smiling, impressed that he caught them some real meat. Naruto grabbed the fish, which were now turning a nice golden brown, and handed them to Temari and Ino. "Ero Sennin taught me a couple of tricks while I traveled with him and survival was one of them. I know several tricks in catching fish and I'd be happy to show you both later," he offered. Temari and Ino smiled and took their seats next to Naruto at the fire, enjoying the warmth of the fire as they watched the sun set. Temari figured that the shelters could wait until tomorrow. They've done enough for today, and truth be told, it didn't look like it was gonna rain tonight, so they could just relax. Besides, she enjoyed sleeping under the stars and the night sky was gonna be very lovely that night. For the next half hour or so, Naruto, Temari and Ino would enjoy fish cooked over an open flame and coconut milk to wash it down. It would have been nice to have some kind of seasoning for the fish, like or salt, but it was still very good and they were grateful that Naruto would go out of his way for them to put together a decent dinner for them using what he had. Naruto was a great help for them both. Once they finished eating, Naruto, Temari and Ino would take some of the giant leaves that she found earlier that day so they could make some beds next to the campfire. Once laid out, they were actually quite comfortable and soon, all three teens were able to adjust to a comfortable position next to the warmth of the flames which were slowly beginning to die down. They then noticed that Naruto grabbed some stones which were next to the flames and bring them close to him. "What are you doing?" asked Ino, raising a brow as Naruto was cuddling with the rocks. "Another trick," he replied. "I had these stones that I gathered earlier today next to the fire so that they warm up over time. Now that I'm ready to go to bed, I can bring these to bed and have heated rocks next to me so I can stay nice and warm tonight because they'll stay warm for several hours through the night," he told her. "I got some stones for you and Temari as well if you want 'em," he offered. Temari heard this as well. Both she and Ino would take several stones into their makeshift beds and both of them were amazed how nice and warm they were. With their stomachs nice and full and their beds nice and warm, they weren't gonna have any problem going to bed tonight. They still had a lot to work tomorrow morning, mind you. They needed to make shelters so they'd have safe places to sleep in case it rains later on, ways to store up on clean water so that they wouldn't have to hike through the jungle just to get a drink of clean water, as well as build an outhouse here on the beach for the near future. But for now, this was a good night. Both ladies would fall asleep thinking that they were happy to have Naruto with them because he's proven to be a lot smarter and more helpful than most would think he was. The next day, Naruto would turn over and yawn as he would get up and stretch himself awake. He'd look over and see both Ino and Temari were still sleeping soundly. He got up and headed over to grab himself another coconut so he could have a drink of the milk to start his morning. He also grabbed another mango and a banana that was now a nice shade of yellow so it was fit to peel. As he enjoyed the fruit, he couldn't help but notice that he really wanted a hot and steaming bowl of ramen. Fish and fruit were good, but he dreamed of Ichiraku that night and it made him wish that he could order one of Chuki's miso ramen bowls right now. Come to think of it, he was really feeling a bit homesick. There was a lot back home that he was eager to get back to. He figured that he'd ask the girls if they had a plan on how to leave the island. He noticed something out of the corner of his eye and turned to see both girls waking up. "Morning Temari, morning Ino," he greeted as he took another bite of the mango. "Morning Naruto," greeted Temari when she finished yawning. "Morning," said Ino. "Do you have any more coconuts with some water in them?" she asked him. Naruto nodded and got up to bring the other half of the coconut he broke open that morning to her. Once she reached for it, she then sniffed for a moment and gagged before bringing her fingers up to hold her nose. "What's wrong?" he asked her. "Naruto, please don't take this the wrong way," said Temari. Naruto turned to see her holding her nose as well. "But you really stink," she told him. Naruto turned to Ino who nodded at that. He then took a few steps back, lifted his arm and sniffed before gagging himself. Naruto laughed and blushed before bringing one of his hands behind the back of his neck. I guess I have gone some time without taking a shower, huh? He asked, laughing a bit. To be fair, I would love to take a bath right now, said Ino with a sympathetic grin. Seems to me that's gonna be another problem we're gonna need to solve together. Temari remarked. Today was certainly gonna be a big day for the three of them. They were gonna need to build shelters, build storage for clean water, storage for food, and find a place where they could take a bath. On the beach, Ino was sleeping in her makeshift bed peacefully before finally rolling over and waking up. She sat up and yawned herself awake again before getting up and stretching. She looked to see Temari sitting at the fireplace eating a mango for breakfast. She walked over and picked a mango and a banana for herself before taking a seat at the fire with the Sanjanan. Morning, she greeted as she started peeling her banana. Morning, Temari replied, taking a small bite out of her mango, trying to eat it without getting the juices to drip down her face. Ino took a look to the left and right for a second. Where's Naruto? She asked her. He said he wanted to take a look around, replied Temari, wiping her chin. I talked with him for a couple of minutes while we ate and then he headed off to scout out the island some more. I thought it was a good idea because we could use a full layout of the land and probably get an idea of how big the island really is, she told her. Ino nodded and took a bite of her banana, and for the next few minutes, both ladies would eat quietly and simply enjoy the rich taste of the island fruit. That was when they saw someone walking down to them. In the distance, Naruto was heading down, and from the look on his face, they could tell he found something. You look like you've got some good news, Naruto, said Temari. Actually, I'm one of his Kage Bunshin, the clone replied. But yeah, Naruto found something all right, he told them. What did he find? Ino asked him. A shipwreck. He answered. There's a large ship that was beached and it's actually in pretty good shape. He thinks we can use it, he told them. Both Temari and Ino looked over at each other and then back to the clone. Take us to Naruto, Ino told him. With Naruto, both Kunoichi would follow Naruto's clone along the beach, and after about 30 minutes or so, they saw in the distance what Naruto found. On the beach was this large trading ship that looked like it had tattered sails still hanging from the mast and some damage near the bottom of the ship where it looked like it ran up against the rocks before it was beached. They also saw Naruto on the deck of the ship and it looked like he was sorting through the things he's found so far. That was when his clone vanished, and in doing so, the memories it had flashed over to him, so he knew that Ino and Temari arrived. He smiled and got up, walked over to the side and waved, greeting his fellow blondes. Hey guys, he called out. What do I think? Quite the findings, right? He asked. Temari smiled and placed one of her hands on her hip. Very nice, Naruto, she replied. What have you found on it so far? She asked him. Come on up and see for yourself. He called back and waved for them to come up. Ino and Temari then flashed up on deck with Naruto to see what he'd found so far. Based upon what he'd found, this was clearly a merchant's trading vessel. Naruto had found several crates of canned foods, and judging by how faded the labels were on the metal cans, they've been here for several years. Temari and Ino didn't see any evidence of the people who used to be on this ship, and seeing how there were no longer any lifeboats on the sides of the ship, it was clear that they have left a long time ago. Ino made it a mental note to find a way to cook the food outside of the cans so that neither of them would risk lead poisoning. She knew that Temari could use a wind-style ninjutsu to open them, so that wouldn't be a real problem. Naruto also seemed to have found several bags of spices and seasonings, which was very nice. Temari was hoping that if they were to find some wildlife to hunt, they could season the meat rather than just cooking it over the flame and eating it as such. They also noticed that Naruto found several rolls of fine silk, and the both of them thought that this was a godsend. For the last few days, the three of them have been sleeping on makeshift beds from giant leaves, and while they were comfortable, Ino and Temari have been wanting to sleep on something that at least felt like a real bed. Beyond that, Naruto also found several coils of rope, some rolls of cloth, and there were a few more crates of wine as well. Like I said, quite a find, right? Naruto asked with a grin. This is very nice, Naruto, replied Temari. I'm glad you decided to take that scouting trip when you did, because this will make our stay here much better, she commented. Was this everything you could find? Ino asked him. The only other things left are a few crates of tools down below, he answered. I was just about to bring them up before you got here, he told them. Would you go and get them? Temari asked him. We're gonna need them because the three of us have a lot of work to do, she told them. Like what? Ino asked her. We're gonna be salvaging as much usable wood and materials as we can because we need to build proper shelters, she answered. The weather has been nice for the last few days now, but it's only a matter of time before it starts raining again, and the last thing we want is to be caught in a very bad rainstorm, she told them both. Naruto nodded and ran through the door and down below deck to find the tools like Temari asked him. The girls watched him come back up carrying a crate filled with all sorts of tools and one of his clones carrying several shovels, which Temari thought was good too. For the next several hours, Naruto, Temari and Ino would use the hammers to rip out the nails that held the wooden planks into place on the frame of the ship's hull. By mid-afternoon, the three of them had somewhere between 400 to 500 boards of wooden planks and some beams as well so that they could build their shelters, and they collected several bins of the nails too so they could reuse them. Naruto then summoned several clones to help carry the load. Temari and Ino grabbed the crates of food and silk while Naruto would use an army of clones to carry the wood, tools, nails, and Temari advised that they bring the sails as well so they could use them too. Once they got back to their camp on the beach, Naruto put everything back down and all his clones dispersed. They all then took a seat around the fire and took a rest before they'd pick back up on work again. Naruto took it upon himself to crack open another coconut so that he and the ladies could get a drink while they rested. They also ped around a few mangoes and bananas for lunch too. Personally though, Naruto wished that they had some kind of meat. All the fruit he's been eating has been getting old very quickly and he was dying for beef, pork or chicken right now. So, what's our next move? Naruto asked after swallowing his banana. Next comes where we work on the framework for the shelters. Temari replied after taking a sip from the coconut. And Naruto, I know you've done plenty already, but I have a special favor I have to ask from you, she told him. Like what? He asked before taking a bite of his mango. I want you to go over there, she pointed. And dig a hole at least 6 feet deep, she instructed. Naruto blinked and swallowed his mouthful before responding. Sounds easy enough, but what for? He asked her. We're gonna build 3 different projects today, she answered. 2 shelters for the 3 of us to sleep in and an outhouse where the hole will be dug, she explained. Yeah, okay, I guess that makes sense, he replied. I gotta say, it's great that we're gonna be using the wood from the ship for the housing. Ino spoke at last. The wood used for the ships like that trading vessel is conditioned so that water runs right off it easily and it won't leak so we can avoid the rain, she commented. I'm also glad that we grabbed the sails when we did, said Temari. We can probably make some decent hammocks out of them and combine those with the silk that you found, and I think our nights here are gonna be very comfortable. Once again Naruto, very well done, she told him. Glad I can help guys. He smiled. Once the 3 of them have had their fill and a long enough break, they then got to work on their IGN ments. Naruto made 2 more cage buncheon and the 3 of them grabbed some shovels and got to work on that ditch. The best part about sand was that it wasn't too difficult to dig through at all. Meanwhile, Temari and Ino began working on the framework for the huts they were gonna make. By their count, they had 24 beams, so it was decided that they'd use 8 for each hut, which would be arranged in octagons. 4 would be used for the outhouse while the last 4 would be used for the hammocks. All in all, it was a perfect setup for a wide and comfortable hut. By the time Ino and Temari had the beams standing up, Naruto had finished digging. Naruto then headed over with his clones and they then started putting the walls up, which was really just on plank on top of the other. Naruto's clones would hold them in place while he, Ino and Temari would nail them into place nice and securely to the beams. It was just their luck that they had already finished with one hut with all the walls put up and they still had plenty of wood to work with left over. They then repeated the process with the second hut and sure enough, they had enough wood to do that as well. I gotta say Naruto, you really seem to know what you're doing. Where did you learn to build like this? Temari asked him. Shortly after the fight between Konoha, Suna and Oto, I had to help rebuild the damage and I learned quite a lot, he replied. Truthfully, I'm only repeating what I was taught the first time, he told her. Oh right, the attack, she responded, remembering how she and her village were tricked into attacking Konoha by Orochimaru. Hope you guys, she started before Naruto cut in. Temari, it's all in the past, he replied with a grin. Besides, look at where we are now. Gaara and I are good friends and so are our villages, he told her. Temari smiled at his response. Yeah, you're right, she replied. Now, let's get to work on the rooftops, she told him. Working on the rooftops were a little more tricky than the framework or the walls, but Naruto was able to use some of the planks to form a cone-like shape on top and then they were able to line them up all the way around, nailing them in place. The angle of the roof would allow the rain water to simply run down the sides and wash off easy without simply leaking through the ceiling. Ino made a mental note to find some sort of string and put the seashells on them and make seashell doors for their huts. She figured that if they were gonna be staying here for a while, may as well do so in style right. However, they needed to finish up on the outhouse first and right now, they were running low. They were actually worried a little about having to make a second trip. In the end, however, they were worried for nothing. Naruto made a suitable outhouse complete with a door for the entrance and for privacy. Once the three of them were done with the buildings themselves, they then got to work on the bedding. Ino and Temari would go into their hut. Both of them agreed that Naruto needed his own because while they were trying to be nice about it, he still stank from the lack of showers these last couple of days, and got to work on the hammocks. Both girls were able to stand the beams upward like they did before when they were doing the framework and place them into the ground that was the floor of their hut. They then began working on the sails themselves. Temari used her wind chakra to cut them into just the right sizes and shapes so that she and Ino would be able to tie them to the wooden beams. They set them up into a bunk bed with one hanging over the other. They then brought in the silk and were able to lay them in the hammocks so that they'd have comfortable sheets and pillows, and once that was done, both of them laid down on their new beds, Temari on the top and Ino on the bottom, and both of them let out some pleasurable sighs. Both of them thought that the silk just felt so nice. They've been sleeping on leave for days now and they were thrilled that they were able to finally lay on actual bedding. These silk sheets and pillows felt like clouds under their bodies and it was wonderful. At the same time, Naruto had already finished up on his hammock too, and he was also able to take a few and enjoy the wonderful feeling of soft and comfortable silk sheets and pillows like the girls were able to. By now, it was nighttime and all three of them met up around their campfire to enjoy a dinner of mangoes, papaya and bananas with coconut. Tomorrow, the three of them agreed to go deeper into the jungle and look for other kinds of food because although bananas, mangoes and papaya are tasty, you can't keep eating the same stuff over and over without growing absolutely sick of it. One of the things the three of them really wanted right now was meat of some sort. Even something like a kind of bird would do. I gotta say, it was pretty rough, but we did a lot of good work today. Naruto commented before taking a sip from his coconut shell. I agree, you did a great job today with finding that wreckage, thanks Naruto, replied Temari. Thanks Temari. He replied only for his smile to drop as he saw both Ino and Temari slide away a bit while holding their noses. But seriously, you still really stink Naruto. Ino said, I haven't had a chance to bath since this all started, please cut me a break. He whined, which got both of them to laugh. After dinner, Naruto went to his hut while Ino and Temari went to theirs. Tomorrow was gonna be another day and they had no clue what was gonna be in store for them. While they were falling asleep, their minds were full. One moment, they were wondering what else they were gonna find here and what they were gonna have to do for survival. Another idea that they came up with was looking for large stones to make an SOS sign for ping ships to see so they can finally be rescued. Ino and Temari were mostly thinking about their families and wondering if they were ever gonna see any of them again. Both the kunoichi had a little more trouble falling asleep than Naruto did, but not long after they'd thought on it enough, they eventually did. The next day, Temari would wake up and feel great. These last few days, she'd feel like shit from sleeping on the hard ground like she'd been doing, and now, she felt awesome. She had to praise Naruto again for finding these rolls of silk because last night was the most relaxing sleep she'd have in a long while. Once she got up and out of her hammock, she'd head over to the fireplace, grab a coconut before splitting it open and taking a drink. That was when she saw Ino working on something not far from her. Getting back up, she walked on over to her fellow blonde to know what she was working on. "Good morning, Ino," Temari greeted. "Morning," she replied. "New project?" She asked her. "Remember our old raft that we were in to drift here?" She asked her. "What about it?" Temari asked back. She showed her what she was working on. She had cut out the whole bottom of the raft and then used some of the leftover materials to form another frame for it to be laid into. The end result looked something like a tub. "This is for catching rainwater," she told her. "Now we don't have to either depend on coconuts for our meals or hike all the way out to get to the stream should we want water. If it rains, we can collect it in here and have some clean water to drink," she told her. "That's not a bad idea," she replied with a grin. Ino looked left and right for a moment before responding. "Hey, do you know where Naruto went?" she asked her. "I thought he was with you," she answered. "No, I haven't seen him all morning," Ino replied. "Well, let's go find him," she responded. "We gotta take another look around the island anyway, so may as well," she added. Ino and Temari would enter the jungle together and then split up to cover more ground. They went twice as far as they did the last time they entered the jungle. After about an hour or so, Temari was surprised to find some pineapples growing in a large patch, which made her really excited. Now they could have something else and something a little sweeter for breakfast each morning. She grabbed a few and then took off to find either Ino or Naruto, hopefully both, so she could show them her findings and get some help picking them and taking them all back to the camp. After about 5 minutes of searching, she saw Ino standing in the distance. She smiled and made her way over to the other blonde girl. "Hey Ino, you're gonna love this, I found a patch of pineapples. Come on and help me pick some," she told her. Her smile vanished when Ino didn't reply but just kept looking further ahead. "Ino," she asked, walking over to see if she heard her or not. "What is it?" she asked, now standing next to her. Ino, whose eyes were wide open, pointed in the direction of where she was looking. Temari looked in the same direction and in an instant, her eyes shot open and she started blushing from what she saw. "Oh, wow," was all she could say. In the distance, Naruto was underneath a waterfall and letting it wash over him. The reason why Ino and Temari were so surprised was because he was completely. "I guess, he decided to take us up on our advice and take a bath," Ino said with a grin as her eyes drank in his well-built physique and muscular arms and torso. Clearly, 2 years of training with Jiraiya have worked wonders on his body because she thought he looked really hot. Wait, did she just think that Naruto Uzumaki was hot? He has a really nice. Temari commented with a smirk, thinking he looked very appealing right about now. Naruto then turned around so they could get the full view of him from the front and both teens dropped into the bushes to avoid being seen, but they couldn't stop blushing even redder. His biceps, his pectorals, his six-pack, there was no way this could be Naruto because they both thought he had the body of a god. "I never thought. Ino started at a loss for words. Temari looked further south on his body. "Wow, that guy could shame a horse," she said, looking at his manly glory. "I cannot move my legs," Ino said finally. Later that day, Naruto would help both Ino and Temari with harvesting the pineapples, but he couldn't help but notice that the both of them were acting pretty weird. All throughout the day, he'd hear them giggling when they thought he didn't notice, and it was whenever he turned his back on them. "What's gotten into Ino and Temari?" he asked himself inwardly. "I swear, girls can be so weird," he thought. It had been a month now since a terrible storm washed Naruto, Ino and Temari overboard and left them lost at sea. Since then, the Hokage, the Lady Tsunade and the Kazekage Gaara, have been sending parties out to find them over and over again. Gaara and Kankuro wanted to find their older sister while Tsunade is interested in finding Ino because Inoichi has been begging her to help find his daughter and heiress while she personally wanted to find her surrogate son. They sent 3 different teams out to sea and to look for any signs or clues as to where they were, and none of them have returned with either the lost ninjas or any clues as to what happened. It was disheartening each time a team returned only to say they found nothing. Tsunade was currently in her office and having a few drinks when the door opened. She looked up to see Gaara and Kankuro. Kage-sama. She greeted respectfully. Hokage-sama. He greeted back. Have you any news? She asked him. One of our teams returned just recently. He replied. Again, no sign of either of them. He told her. Tsunade sighed and sat back in her chair while Gaara took a seat across from her at her desk. Any news from one of your search parties? He asked her. The blonde Hokage shook her head. Haven't heard anything from them yet, but I imagine we'll hear something similar to what your search party told you, she told him. We can't be too quick to give up on them, said Kankuro. They're out there somewhere and they're counting on us to find them, he told them both. We're not giving up on them, Kankuro, replied Gaara to his older brother. I have every intention of finding our older sister and our friends, he said in his usual stoic tone. We're just weary, that's all, said Tsunade, pouring herself another drink and downing it. But I promise, we will find them. It's just frustrating to send out search party after search party only to find nothing at all, she added. The three of them would talk about the situation for a couple more hours. Gaara and Kankuro going on about how neither of them have gotten much sleep since Temari went missing and Tsunade either losing sleep over Naruto or being hounded by Inoichi to find his daughter. Wherever the three of them were, they only hoped that they were okay and just holding on. The island. Naruto was currently scouring the jungle again, and this time, he was looking for a source of meat. After eating nothing but the various fruits that he and the girls have been gathering for a month, he decided that he had to find some kind of meat because he felt that he was gonna start shitting bricks. Naruto found his first clue to actual wildlife when he found some tracks that looked something like hoof prints and some scat of an animal. Judging by how fresh these clues were, he could tell it wasn't too far away and that he was on the right trail. Naruto would follow the tracks but kept really quiet until he found a clearing where the tracks led him. He saw a pack of wild pigs wallowing in the mud with boars rolling around and piglets feeding off their mothers. Seeing how fat and well fed these pigs were made his mouth water and he licked his lips, thinking about how good it's gonna smell when he has one of these fat hogs roasting over the campfire and properly seasoned with some of the spices they found off the shipwreck. He looked around through the clearing until he found the biggest and possibly the fastest of them all. A couple of well-placed kunai and shuriken and he and the ladies would be eating well for a week. Naruto slowly made his way around the clearing, making sure to be careful where he stepped so as not to break any twigs and set off any alarms, and then got into position about 20 feet from his primary target. Naruto drew several shuriken and then jumped from his hiding place with weapons drawn. You're mine, he shouted loudly and causing the pack of pigs to erupt into chaos. The sows were the first to get up from their naps and started squealing as they ran into the jungle and away from the danger, with their little crying piglets chasing after them from having their suckling interrupted. Many of the other boars would follow after them, making sure that the hunter wouldn't try to go after their young, which left Naruto to face the really big boar. He was a really big one too, much larger than he originally thought when he saw him from far off. He was covered in mostly gray rough fur with black bristles running down his back like a mohawk. He had 4 large tusks in his gaping maw, and from his glowing red eyes, he looked really pissed. Naruto could tell he was pretty fierce from all the scars on his body. The Miv boar stared Naruto right in the eyes and he right back at him. He then started sweeping his left hoof against the dirt, which meant that he was getting ready to charge forward and tear the intruder to shreds with his razor-sharp tusks. He then started running at him with a loud, "Re." Naruto smirked and waited the very last second before jumping and doing a front flip right over him before landing on the other side. "I've got you now," he shouted before throwing his shuriken at the Miv beast, which buried themselves into his flesh and earning a loud squealing from the Miv pig. But Naruto could tell that this just seemed to make him even angrier, and he responded by charging again. Naruto drew a kunai in each hand and charged with his own battle cry, ready to claim victory against the Miv wild boar. The battle would end when Naruto slashed him dead with 2 quick strikes to his throat with his kunai knives. With Temari and Ino, both ladies started their day at the waterfall, which has become their new communal bath. The three of them made agreements to let the girls have the waterfall to themselves in the mornings and then Naruto could take his bath later that evening. This way, both would have plenty of privacy and neither would ever accidentally walk in on one another. Neither Ino nor Temari have ever told Naruto that they were peeking at him showering though one time. What was great about this place that Naruto discovered was not only was there a natural waterfall which you could stand under and enjoy the cool water pouring down your body, but there was also a MIV body of water which was a natural hot spring so you could have a nice hot bath too. The water that they there swimming in was just the right temperature because of the constant heating from underground while the water from the falls would keep it from overheating. It was nice enough to keep you hot and comfortable but cool enough to keep from boiling yourself alive. Temari and Ino had to praise Naruto for finding this bath because they needed it in the worst way. It was really unfair of them to have been constantly ripping on Naruto for his BO when they themselves noticed that they kinda stank too. Naruto never brought it up which they really appreciated but then again, he may never have noticed. All they knew now was they were finally able to bath regularly again. Now they just wish they had shampoo, conditioner and body wash. Temari was laying against the side of the pool with her arms hanging over the side but her S on down submerged beneath the hot water. She sighed in relaxation as she felt her troubles being washed away in the hot water of the hot spring. Ino was swimming in the middle and rubbing the water into her skin. She thought that there had to some kind of special minerals in the water because she noticed that ever since she and Temari started taking baths regularly in the hot spring, their skin became so incredibly soft and smooth. Even Konoha's public bath resort didn't have water that worked this kind of wonders into her body. It even helped to keep her hair soft and easy to work with too. Now she wished she had a hairbrush. She then swam over to the Tsunajonin and took a seat right next to her. This is really nice, isn't it? She asked her. Temari kept her eyes closed but nodded slowly. Naruto just continues to impress me, she said softly. This made Ino think a moment before responding. You've been thinking about Naruto too, haven't you? She asked her. Temari opened her eyes and looked back at her. I'm concerned about both of you. We're all trapped here and we're gonna be depending on one another until we finally get back off, she replied. That's not what I was referring to, replied the younger blonde. I've seen the ways you've looked at him some days and don't deny it, she told her. The older blonde was quiet for a moment before sighing and looking straight ahead. He's very selfless and caring, she finally said. Everything he's done so far has been for us, she told her. While they talked, they were unaware of the animals that were making their way over to the two blonde girls. Naruto's always had a very selfless personality. Ino continued. When we were kids, he tried as often as he could to be really nice and helpful because he wanted friends to play with during his childhood. He's an orphan so friends were probably the closest thing he ever had to family or loved ones, she told her. How well did you know him growing up? Asked the Sand Kunoichi. Not as well as the boys did, she admitted. Naruto played with Sasuke, Shikamaru, Choji and Kiba more often than any of the girls in our CL. But he was as nice as he could be to everyone, both the boys and the girls, she told her. He must have made quite the impression on you if you remember that far back. Did you like him? She asked her. I was still competing with all the other girls for Sasuke-kun, she replied. Naruto was nice and all, but he was a little too wild for the rest of us. Now Sasuke-kun, he was the real catch, she said, smiling back and remembering how calm and cool the Uchiha always was. That was when she noticed Temari giving her a weird look. What? She asked her. You mean to tell me that you were one of his fangirls too? She asked her. I'm allowed to like whoever I want to, she shouted back. Even if he's a traitor? She asked. Sasuke turned his back on you, Sakura, Naruto and everyone who cared about him. He betrayed his village by siding with the man who did great harm to both of our villages, she added. Ino was quiet for a moment but then laid back again. I know, she replied. Truth be told, it broke my heart when he went rogue, but I was able to get over it over time. To my knowledge, Sakura is the only one holding out for him, she told her. I imagine she'll be waiting for some time, replied Temari. That was when Ino decided to turn the conversation around. What about you? She asked her. What do you think about Naruto? She asked the Suna ninja. I didn't really think much about him when we first met, she replied. I thought he was really loud and just knew how to talk big, but beyond that, just another genin fresh out of the academy, she explained. Then he won one upset victory after another. First against Kiba, who was faster and stronger than he was, then an amazing fight against Neji, who had every advantage you could have over an opponent when it came to close quarter combat, and then he did what I thought was impossible. Twice. She went on. Not only did he beat Gaara, who I thought would never lose a fight as long as he lived, but he changed him in ways I never thought he would. Gaara was a completely different person after one battle with Naruto, she told her. Ino smiled. Sounds to me like I'm not the only one who has a good impression of Naruto, she said with a grin. And he would only continue to impress me, she continued. When our father died, Kankuro and Gaara were the only family I had left. When the Akatsuki attacked, I was so sure it was gonna be over for Gaara. My little brother was gonna die and I wasn't able to help him. But Naruto saved him and brought him back home, saving my family, she said with a fond grin. At first, I came to respect him. These days, I came to really admire him. Since we got stuck her, I came to see, she was cut off when she heard something behind her. She looked behind and then shot up to see something that made her really mad. Hey, she screamed. Ino turned as well to see two monkeys now wearing their cloths. Both primates just started at the completely and angry human ladies who started right back at them. Give us back our cloths, you little devils. Those are ours, shouted Ino. Both monkeys responded by turning and running as fast as they could and climbed up the trees and out of their reach. Both Kunoichi jumped out of the water and chased after the little primates, completely and desperate to get their cloths back. Those were the only cloths they had on them and they didn't want to lose them to a pair of filthy animals who thought it was humorous to wear human clothing. With Naruto. Naruto was currently at the beach on the rocks where the waves were washing up gently around him. He was probably a few feet from the water and could see hundreds of fish swimming around and eating smaller fish. Shortly after killing the boar in the jungle, he brought it back and did everything Jiraiya taught him to do when hunting. He used his kunai to castrate it, skin it, gut it, and then stuck a long sharpened piece of wood through its mouth and out the other end. He set it up over a really big campfire he got going and let his clone slowly turn it over the flames to let it cook slowly. At this rate, he and the girls would be feasting on spit-roasted wild boar for dinner. To top it all off, he got a very nice boar pelt which he would clean and decorate his hut with later. Now he just needed to find something to cook for lunch and figured that Ino and Temari would like something hot off the fire for lunch too. On his way back, he found some bamboo which gave him an idea. He cut some of the thinner ones which fit like a spear perfectly in his hand and brought them all back with him. He could always come back for more later on if he wanted. Bamboo was one of the fastest growing plants on Earth, with some species able to grow 3 feet in a single day. It was highly unlikely they'd run out anytime soon. Once the hog had been set up over the fire and the clones started turning it, Naruto used another kunai to start sharpening the bamboo into spears with barbed tips like on a harpoon. This was his idea of fishing. Once he had about 5 harpoons ready to go, he stood on the edge of the rock he was on and looked for the right fish to spear. He slowly lifted the harpoon till it was at his eye level so as not to scare any of them while they fed. Then he lifted his other hand to point ahead and used this to take aim. Many of them refused to stay in one place for very long, which made things a bit frustrating. Throwing a spear in water was harder than you'd think. The water could cause it to shift off the path you threw it in and your fish would get away. Naruto had to exercise some real patience while waiting for the right time to strike. His waiting paid off when he saw one of the fish stop completely and just stay right where it was. This was his chance. Still pointing ahead with his finger and sights trained right on the fish, he drew his harpoon back and then threw it with all his might, spearing the fish where it was with the tip buried into the undersea sand. Yes, he cheered, lifting his prize out of the water and watching as it flopped around with the barbed harpoon sticking through it. A couple more of these and I'll treat Temari and Ino to a nice and tasty fish dinner, he said with a pleased grin. He then set the harpoon up on the bottom end so that the fish was sticking upward. Then he grabbed another harpoon and waited for the fish that scattered to come back. After a while and catching 2 more fish, that was when something occurred to him. Ino and Temari have been gone for quite a while now. I hope they're okay, he said out loud before lifting his harpoon and getting ready for another fish. With Ino and Temari, both blonde teens had given up on trying to catch either of those filthy animals. They tried chasing them, but those monkeys were fast and they weren't able to find them once they climbed too high up in the trees. Plus, they were sure that those filthy creatures had already ruined them by now, so it wouldn't have been worth trying to get them back anyway. This had to be the most shameful and disgraceful day for 2 young kunoichi ever. Their cloths being stolen by a pair of monkeys and forcing them to chase them while they were completely. This was a completely new level of emberment for the 2 of them. The only thing that could possibly make this worse was if Naruto were to see them now. Fully exposed and dirty again from running through the jungle. What are we gonna do? Ino asked her fellow blonde. We can't just head back to camp like this. We can't let Naruto see us in such a disgraceful state, she said, kinda panicking. He won't, she replied. We're just gonna have to come up with something else to wear, she told her. Like what? She asked her. There is plenty of leftover silk back at the huts, she replied. We can probably make ourselves something like silk skirts and bras. It's not the end of the world, she told her. But what if Naruto is still there? She asked her. The last thing I want is for him to see me like this, she told her. And he won't, she replied. Naruto spends a lot of time scouting out the island, so he may not even be at the camp. Even if he is, we'll just have to think of something. Don't forget, we're ninjas too. If we're quick, careful and lucky, we can sneak in, make some cloths for ourselves and then get dressed without him being any wiser, she explained. Both of them took another quick bath to get all the mud and dirt off their bodies from running around in the jungle for so long, and then quietly got back to the edge of the jungle and to the beach where their camp was. Both of them silently cursed when they saw Naruto was indeed still at the camp, so they decided to go one at a time while his back was turned. However, their luck turned when they saw Naruto heading to the outhouse, so once they saw the door shut, they ran on over as fast as they could without making a sound and into their hut together. They then began sorting through the different silks they had and got to work on making themselves some nice new cloths to wear. They just needed to be quick and quiet about it. Naruto would emerge from the outhouse and would go back to the campfire where he was working on tonight's dinner. That was when he heard the girls behind him. Naruto. He heard Temari from behind. He turned to face the older kunoichi. Yeah, Temari, he asked before his eyes nearly popped out of his skull and his jaw dropped. Can you give us your honest opinion? What do you think? Asked Ino. Ino and Temari were now wearing silk skirts that wrapped around their hips and were tied off to the side, which left one of their legs still visible. The skirts were short, cut just below the knee. They also were wearing silk bras made by twisting them once in the center between their S and again on the left and right before being brought around and tied into a secure knot from behind. Both Ino and Temari's outfits were nearly identical, except Temari's was a light green and Ino's was a lovely shade of violet. What made Naruto sweat a bit was seeing how much of their skin was still exposed. Both of their midriffs were shown off, with him seeing their flat and well-toned stomachs and their cleavage somewhat visible too. Their outfits left much to the imagination. Well, Temari asked. You guys look great, he replied finally with a nervous smile and feeling a bit warm. But, what happened to your old cloths? He asked. Thinking quickly, Temari thought of a less embering story and answered first. They were getting old and worn out, she answered. We weren't gonna be able to wear them for much longer anyway, so we decided to make some new ones from the leftover silk from the shipwreck, she explained. Ino thought this was a good cover and quickly played along. Plus, the island is perfect for this kind of getup, so we decided that if we were gonna be waiting for someone to rescue us, we may as well wear something more comfortable and stylish, she told him. Oh, I guess that makes sense, he replied, nodding and smiling. By the way, are you guys gonna leave your hair like that too? He asked them. That was when Temari and Ino finally noticed that they never put their hair up in their usual styles of ponytails or pigtails. Their hair was now falling down in its natural state. Ino's was much longer and ran all the way down to her lower back, while Temari's was shoulder length. Yeah, I guess, replied Ino. Naruto smiled at her response. Well, I like it. You should try wearing it like that more often, it looks really nice, guys. He told them. Both of them smiled at the pleasant remark. It was nice to be treated like a girl and be complimented for your looks from time to time. That was when they both noticed the smell of the campfire. What is that amazing aroma? Asked Temari, sniffing the air a few times. Naruto grinned and stepped aside to let them see his campfire. I've been getting us some food, he replied, pointing at the hog and the fish. I killed a boar and I'm slow roasting it right now. It should be ready tonight for dinner, he told them. Ino and Temari's stomachs started making the very unladylike growling noises that reminded them that they were hungry. After eating nothing but wild fruit for over a month, seeing the hog roasting on a spit with the fat of it gleaming and smelling it cooking made their mouths water. They literally almost started crying when they saw how nice and brown it was from cooking over the flame. Naruto walked over and picked up a couple of fish that were on sticks and brought them back up to them. I also have caught several fish today with some harpoons I made earlier, he told them. I've caught, filleted and gutted these fish myself and added some of the spices to them while they were cooking, like I did with the boar, he told them before handing them the fish on the sticks. Both of them thanked him and took some small bites of the meat and their eyes shot wide open when the taste hit their tongues. Naruto. This is amazing, Ino said after swallowing her mouthful. I had no idea you could cook so well, she told him. This has to be one of the best fish lunches I've ever had. Temari told him before taking another bite. Thank you so much, she told him. I'm glad to see that you guys enjoy it, he replied happily. Once the boar is finally ready, we'll have a feast of spit roasted boar with fresh fruit for dinner tonight, he told them. I can hardly wait, replied Temari. This is gonna be a good night, I can tell, said Ino. At dinner time, the three of them would take their seats around the fire while Naruto used a kunai knife to carve up the meat. Both Ino and Temari had to be careful how they sat because while they did make some awesome skirts and bras, they weren't able to make themselves any underwear, and that was something they had to be very careful about with Naruto. They figured that they could probably try and make their own panties later on once they found a chance and away from him, obviously. That night, Naruto, Temari and Ino would enjoy some of the best wild boar pork you could ever eat from a spit roast. The fat melted in their mouths and the meat was incredibly tender. Top that off with mangoes and pineapples with some coconuts and the three of them felt like they were eating like royalty. Temari and Ino were becoming more and more impressed with Naruto as they stayed on this island. He was very useful when building shelters, scouting and scavenging, survival in general, and now cooking. The both of them were gonna be hoping that Naruto would cook for them like this every night they were there. They actually ate a little more than they should have and felt somewhat stuffed, but it was worth it. Once they had eaten their share, Naruto wished both of them good night and they did the same for him before everyone went off to their huts and went to bed. Before they finally went to sleep, Temari and Ino stayed up a bit and kept thinking about Naruto some more. He worked so hard for the both of them ever since they were stranded and later lost on this island. Everything from scouting trips, building shelters and hunting for food gave both girls a sense of comfort that they had such a strong and reliable man looking out for and taking care of them. Naruto was providing everything from food and shelter right down to friendship and care. They were both quickly becoming very fond of him. They also began wondering how he was feeling about them. They wondered if Naruto felt anything for either of them and if they should try and pursue something with him. In the other hut, Naruto couldn't get the mental images out of his head from seeing Temari and Ino, two very lovely and healthy young women who he was stuck with, dressed in such revealing and hot clothing. He made sure to keep himself as quiet as he could so as not to disturb either of them while they were sleeping before he whipped out his and started masturbating. He figured he'd rub out a few before calling it a night. Naruto would wake up one morning and step out of his hut before heading to the campfire to greet Ino and Temari. Over the last 3 days since he started finding meat, he'd gotten really good at hunting and fishing, which was something that Ino and Temari really appreciated. Since then, the three of them had agreed on which of them did certain chores around their campsite. Ino and Temari would wake up first while Naruto would sleep in for at least another hour and take their joint bath in the hot spring they found not long ago. Once the girls had their bath and Naruto had his rest, they would start gathering supplies for the camp. Naruto would help the girls gather kindling and firewood after they would sit down and have breakfast. Naruto took his seat at the campfire and Ino would hand his half a coconut with something to drink and Temari would hand him a wooden plate with some cooked fish and half a mango for him to eat. He thanked them both and the three of them started eat. While they ate, Temari looked over at Naruto. Hey Naruto, can I ask you something? She asked, which got him to look over to her. What's up? He asked back. Are you in the middle of some new project? She asked him. What do you mean? He asked her. Temari, and I noticed that you've been really stocking up in bamboo and you've been cutting up wood into planks, said Ino. And it looks like you've made some sort of outline with stones not far from here along the beach. Are you working on something? Temari asked again. Oh, that. He replied. Yeah, I wanna keep my mind focused on other things than just hunting and fishing, so I'm gonna build us a house, he said, which surprised them. A house? Asked Ino. Yeah. I thought it would be nice to live in something other than a hut, and if we're gonna be stuck here for a while longer, may as well work on a project to keep busy and give myself something to do, he explained. Do you even know how to build a house? Temari asked him. I've helped to rebuild Konoha after it was damaged, remember? He asked. I'm pretty sure I can get the job done. Why? Do you two not want a nice house to live in? He asked. Now that they really thought about it, Ino and Temari were hoping for something other than the huts they were currently sleeping in. A house had a lot more options than a hut did because you could have a door to keep out the cold and a solid floor rather than always walking on sand. They could also have their own rooms, which would be nice for a change. Ino and Temari did enjoy one another's company as well as Naruto's, but it would be nice to have a space of their own for a change. No, that would be very nice, said Temari with a grin. I'll get to work on it once we finish gathering resources and when I'm done fishing today, he told them. Please let us know if we can help you out, said Ino with her own smile. I will, thanks, he replied with his own grin. Konoha. Tsunade was sitting at her desk in her office reading the latest reports on various missions that her teams have undertaken. She also got another visit from Inoichi and Makino about organizing another team to look for their daughter. Their constant requests was getting tiring, but she didn't blame them. The Cage was looking up and down for his sister and she wanted to find Naruto as well. As annoying as he was, she cared for the little knucklehead. She was gonna send for another team when she heard another knocking at the door. Come in, she replied. In walked the village elders Homura and Kaharu. Tsunade-sama, we need to talk, said the old man. About what? She asked him. We have come to understand that you've sent yet a third team out to sea again on another foolish rescue mission for Naruto, said Kaharu. I did, she replied. And I was about to organize a fourth team since they didn't find anything either. What? Do I need your permission or something to look for lost shinobi? She asked them. Of course not, replied Homura. But this is getting expensive and we've come to ask if you really think it's worth it if the teams you keep sending out can't return with him, he told her. I'm not giving up on him, she replied. Tsunade-sama, I know you care deeply for the boy, said Kaharu. But it's been over 6 months now and we've found neither hide nor hair of him. You're gonna have to accept that he was lost at sea and possibly dead, she told her. One more time, she replied. There's one more section at sea that hasn't been searched yet and the Cage is already organizing another search team right now, so I would like to form another team to look for him, Ino and Temari. Just one more search party. She finished. Homura and Kaharu exchanged a quick look before answering. I understand Tsunade-sama, said Homura. If you wanna give it one more try, then we won't object to it, he told her. Come to think of it, Inoichi-sama has been requesting this for months now, said Kaharu. The Yamanakas have been asking you too, huh? Tsunade asked. We only wish we could give them a better answer, replied Homura. The island. Once they finished eating, Naruto was the first to get up and head to the jungle to begin looking for supplies. While he walked, Ino turned to watch him with her sight focused on his backside. Not long ago, Naruto's cloths had finally worn out and he had to resort to making new cloths like Temari and Ino have. Naruto was a bit disappointed that out of all the cloth they found, none of it was orange, which was his favorite color. But he did find some nice red and black which both the girls thought would make him look good in. Naruto fashioned the black cloth into a vest which hung open so you could still see bare chest, and with a bit of help, he was able to make a pair of shorts from the red cloth. He also went barefoot like Ino and Temari too. Temari saw Ino staring at Naruto and smirked, thinking it would be fun to tease her. "Do you like what you see?" she asked her. Ino jumped a bit when she realized that she was staring. I don't know what you mean," she replied. "Please," said Temari with a smug. "I know that you were staring at his," she said, which got Ino to blush bright red. She said, not knowing what to say, which got Temari to laugh. "Relax, I was just teasing," she told her. "Personally, I don't blame you because Naruto does have a very nice," she said as she got up. "So I wouldn't be surprised if you had a few naughty thoughts about him," she told her. "Have you?" she asked back with a raised brow. "Yeah," replied Temari. "Really?" asked Ino. "All the time," she answered. "But what were you really expecting? He's a handsome young man and I'm a healthy young woman, and after being stuck on this island for so long, it's only natural for me to start looking at Naruto in a different way than I used to, and I wouldn't be surprised if you did too," she explained. Ino took a moment to think about that and then looked back to Temari. "Do you think Naruto is starting to feel the same way towards either of us?" she asked her. Temari smirked and raised a brow. "You mean you haven't noticed?" she asked her. "Naruto has made it kinda clear that he's a leg man because I've noticed how he sneaks glances at our legs when he sit around the campfire for breakfast, lunch and dinner. And even when he thinks nobody notices, he is staring at our tits and s," she told her. Ino blushed at the thought of Naruto sneaking a glance at her s or butt. Part of her wanted to get mad at him, but then again she and Temari would sneak out to watch him bathe, which would seem kinda hypocritical of her. "So Naruto's staring at my boobs and," she thought. "I can't tell if I should be happy, ashamed or aroused," she said to herself. Not long after Naruto went into the jungle to look for other materials for the camp, Temari and Ino decided to go and look as well. The both of them would look for kindling and firewood, and once they found a decent amount, the both of them would then head into the jungle themselves and look for some fruit. The girls found out very quickly that pineapples, mangoes and bananas go really well with spit-roasted wild boar and fried fish. They also wanted to try and figure out how to make some sort of fruit drink too, so the both of them would try experiments with some of the glees they found on the shipwreck months ago. The both of them wished they had milk and yogurt because they really wanted to try and make smoothies for their meals. Suddenly, the both of them heard Naruto in the distance yell really loudly. Both of them jumped while they were gathering fruit when they heard their fellow blonde cry out loudly in pain. Both girls dashed through the jungle with rapid speed towards where they heard Naruto screaming. They found him laying on the ground and on his sides while holding his hand over his ankle while gritting his teeth from the pain he felt. "Naruto, what happened?" shouted Ino as she came over to him. "I just got bitten by a snake," he grunted. "Kami, it hurts like a son of a bitch," he cried as he gripped his ankle where the serpent had bitten him. Temari and Ino looked over to the pile of wood and bamboo that Naruto had gathered earlier and saw a black snake curled up and rearing its head while hissing. Temari recognized the species instantly because of the piercing red eyes that were staring them down. "It can't be," she gasped, looking at the snake that hissed at them. "Ino, we need to get Naruto back to the camp and away from this animal quickly," she told her. Both of them carefully got to Naruto's left and right and lifted him up off the ground, lifting one arm each over their shoulders before taking off. As they headed for their camp, Temari made a mental note to search this area again later because she was gonna need to find another snake of the same species. Naruto was grunting and fighting the urges to cry out in pain, but it was really hard because of the pain that was shooting up and down his leg. Clearly, this was a very dangerous species of snake and he had the misfortune of walking right into one. Naruto's heart was racing through his chest as they reached the beach where the camp was because he wasn't sure what was gonna happen next. Kurama's chakra didn't seem to work against the poison. Both girls laid him down gently on the floor of his hut on top of the cloth that doubled as a rug. "Guys, it really hurts," he said as he started breathing harder. "And why do I feel like I'm getting hotter?" he asked as he started sweating. "Damn it," Temari cursed. He's already beginning to run a fever. Ino, we need to move fast if we're gonna save him, she told her. What are we gonna do? She asked her. We're miles away from any civilization and we don't have any access to antivenom, she replied. But I know how to treat it, she said, which surprised her. You do? She asked. Temari looked over to Naruto, who was sweating heavily. Naruto, I need to discuss something with Ino real quick, but I want you to just wait here. I want you to try and drink as much coconut water as you can to keep hydrated and from overheating, she told him. Naruto took the half shell of the coconut offered him and started drinking it. He then lay back down on his back and coughed a few times while Ino and Temari stepped outside. You said that you know how to treat his wound. Ino asked her fellow blonde. That snake we saw back there was a very venomous species found both in tropical lands as well as my homeland. It's a red-eyes black viper and it's very poisonous, she told her. And yes, I do know how to treat the snake bite, and better yet, we can save Naruto. But we're gonna need to move quickly if we're gonna do so, she told her. How do you know what kind of snake it is? She asked her. Like I said, it's native to the land of wind, she started. There are in fact two subspecies of red-eyes black vipers. There are the desert vipers, which are found around the sands of my village, and the tropical vipers, which are found on islands like this one. Their venom is very unique because it attacks the victim's chakra network system before it moves on to the rest of the nerve system, she explained. But what good will it do if we have no antivenom to treat it? Ino asked while panicking. Relax, Ino, she replied. Naruto's in danger, but we do have time. I'll need you to stay here and take care of him while I get what I need to treat the snake bite. I've seen many different herbs on this island since we've been here, and I'm sure that we have what we need to save his life. But I need you to try and keep Naruto comfortable. The more he moves about, the quicker the poison will spread through his body, and we can't have that, she told her. All right, she replied. What do you need me to do? She asked her. First, make sure that Naruto drinks plenty of liquids, she listed. The more you can make him drink, the more it will strengthen his antibodies and slow the poison's progress. Bear in mind though that soon, he's gonna start feeling really cold and vomiting, which means that he's entered the second stage of the poison's effects. The one thing that can't happen is if he starts hallucinating, because that means he won't have much time left, she told her. How long do you think he has right now? She asked her. 2 hours, 3 if we're lucky, she told her. But that should give me enough time to gather what I need to make an antivenom, she told her. Wait, making antivenom takes several days, sometimes weeks or months. We don't have that kind of time, she protested. If we went with the more modern means of treatment, I would agree with you, but there's a more than one way to make an antivenom with this species of snake, and I plan on using a more old-fashioned method, she explained. It's crude, but it works, and most importantly, it will save his life, she told her. How will you do it? She asked her. Temari took another few minutes to explain what she planned on doing, and once she was done, Ino looked both surprised and slightly grossed out. Oh, she replied. You did ask, she told her. Now stay here with Naruto, I'm gonna be right back, and make sure he keeps drinking the coconut water, she told her before she dashed off. With Temari. The first place that Temari stopped at was the hot spring where everyone took their baths. There was a type of flowers with medicinal properties that grew near the water, and sure enough, she was right and found the little white flowers. She picked herself a small handful and moved on to her next destination. She was gonna head to where she and Ino would gather fruit, because there was another kind of herb she would need. The leaves were needed of this next plant, and she was gonna need a small handful of them too. With Ino and Naruto. Ino saw Naruto coughing violently as he was gasping for breath. She came to his side again and lifted his head up into her lap before she brought the shell of coconut water to his lips to let him drink it. Naruto had a bit of a hard time trying to stop coughing long enough to take a sip, but once he caught his breath, he was able to drink the liquids that Ino offered him. She then lay his head back down carefully and watched as he was breathing heavily, as he did since they first brought him back to camp. Temari, please hurry, she said inwardly as she left to get some more coconut water. With Temari. Temari made it to the grounds where she and Ino would pick fruit for their meals, and it took her probably a few minutes to find what she needed. There was a plant that grew in the shade under one of the mango trees, so she got down and picked a small handful of the leaves. Once she had got what she thought would be enough, she was gonna need to head to her next location. This time, she was gonna head to where Naruto was bidden to find another snake. Okay, the first two requirements were easy enough. Now comes the tricky and far more dangerous part, she said to herself as she dashed through the jungle. Temari was also very careful of where she ran. The last thing she needed right now was to get bitten herself. She wanted to go home, and more importantly, she didn't want to let Naruto and Ino down. She wasn't gonna fail her friends. With Ino and Naruto, Naruto was coughing violently again and Ino was trying to keep him still. It wasn't easy because he was really fighting her and trying to sit back up again. Naruto, please lay back down, she said as she tried to get him to stay still. The more you move around, the quicker the poison will spread, she told him. Naruto kept coughing until he stopped at one point and then started gagging. He then leaned over to one side and she knew what was happening. Quickly, she grabbed one of the bags that Naruto kept his fruit in, which he would snack on sometimes at night before bed, and dumped it out. She then handed it to him, and when he took it, he placed his mouth over the opening and started throwing up into it. She cringed at the revolting sounds of Naruto barfing and the sounds of the bag filling up. Once he was done, he lay his head back down and started breathing heavily again, with his chest heaving with each breath. She then took the bag and brought it out of the hut so that it wouldn't stink up the small room. Then she saw Naruto shivering. Feeling his skin, she was alarmed by how cold he felt to her touch. She then lay down next to him to try and share her body warmth with him and blushed when she felt him wrap his arms around her to hold her close to him. Clearly, he was getting really cold. Temari, you need to hurry. He's progressing faster than we thought, so you need to hurry, she thought. With Temari, Temari had a real difficult time finding one of the snakes. She had hoped that by revisiting the area where Naruto was bitten by one that she would find another, but it seemed that the snake had already moved on. She tried to remain calm, but it was getting harder and harder as time ticked by. She cursed herself for not thinking to capture one the first time she saw one. Still, she couldn't punish herself for something in the past just yet and just kept on looking. She was careful with each step she took and did her best not to lean in too closely to anywhere one of them could be hiding. Just as she was thinking that it was best to move on and look for another snake in another place, she heard an hissing and smiled with relief when she did indeed find another. The serpent coiled up and reared its head upward as it hissed at her, which was what they naturally did when they felt threatened. This was easily gonna be the most dangerous part of the process. She needed to be quick and time things just right if she was gonna both get her hands on the snake without being bitten herself. All she needed was just enough poison and she could begin working on the process of making the antivenom for Naruto. She inched closer to the snake, and as she did, its hissing became louder and louder, which was the warning that it was gonna strike. She was probably a foot from it before she started inching her hand forward. Sweat poured down her face as it narrowed down on her hand. One wrong move and it would be all over. Just a few more inches and the snake lunged forward in attempt to bite her. But unlike Naruto, who wasn't expecting the snake, she was prepared, and using her years of shinobi training and reflexes, she pulled back her head so that its mouth closed on nothing, and then before it could recoil, she lunged her other hand forward and pinned its head to the ground with her fingers firmly around its neck, just behind its head. Gotcha, she said in her mind with a satisfied smirk. Temari then brought out a GL that they used often for drinking, which she fashioned with a piece of cloth over the top tied on with a string made from the same cloth so that it was secured tightly onto the GL. She then gently lifted the snake up and brought it to the GL, and sure enough, it opened its mouth and sank its fangs into the cloth, and she watched as the GL caught and collected the venom. She kept the snake's head over the GL until she was sure she had collected at least a tablespoon or two, which was what she needed. Then she lifted the snake off the GL and put it back down. Then, very carefully, she let go and quickly put some distance between her and the serpent. It hissed once more before slithering away. This should be enough, she thought as she looked at the contents of the GL. Then she dashed off towards the camp. Please just hold on a little while longer, Naruto. I'm gonna make your antivenom and we're not gonna let you die like this. Please hold on, she prayed. with Ino and Naruto. Inside his hut, Naruto was having another really bad coughing fit. Ino held his head in her lap and was trying to get him to drink more coconut water, but it was getting harder and harder for him to stop coughing. She could hear him wheezing, which meant that he was now having difficulty breathing. Temari, we're out of time. You need to make the antivenom and you need to make it now, she said inwardly. Naruto managed to stop coughing long enough for Ino to lift the coconut water to his lips for another drink. With Temari. At the campfire, Temari was working rapidly with the herbs and venom. First, she took the shell of an empty coconut and put both herbs in them before she took a stone and started grinding them together with it. After about a few minutes, she was able to make a nice and moist paste with it. This was just what she was hoping for. Now came the part with the snake venom. She took the GL from earlier and took the cloth top off of it before pouring some coconut water into it and mixing it very carefully. Then she added the paste and mixed that in too, and before long, there was a cloudy liquid in the GL. A mixture of coconut water, snake venom and 2 different kinds of medicinal herbs. She stood up and held the GL out in front of her. Well, bottoms up, she thought before bringing the GL to her lips and drinking it. She had to do her best not to spit it out because the mixture was awful, but she managed to drink it all. Once empty, she put the GL back down and sighed. Shouldn't take long for the effects from the herbs to kick in. I hope Naruto can hold out a little while longer, she thought as she headed towards the hut. Upon entering the hut, Temari saw Ino sitting by Naruto's side while he breathed and wheezed. His chest was heaving, which meant that he was really struggling to breathe, and the sweat pouring down his body, which meant that his fever was getting worse. Ino saw her and lit up. Temari, are you able to treat him now? She asked her. Yeah, I'm ready, she answered. Just keep Naruto still and no matter what happens, make sure he doesn't see me, apply the antivenom, she told her. Ino got down to Naruto's side and gently placed her hands on both sides of his face. Naruto, she said softly to him. Naruto's eyes opened up and he smiled when he saw her looking down at him with her lovely cyan-colored eyes. I must be the luckiest guy on the planet, he said in a daze. I'm being visited by an angel, he said, which caused Ino to blush. Naruto, listen to me, said Ino, trying to stop from blushing. Temari's gonna apply the antivenom now. I need you to remain still and remain calm, she told him. Oh, okay, sure, he said as he started wheezing again. Temari got down on her knees with Naruto's feet right before her. She did her best not to blush as she worked to undo her skirt. I can't believe I'm gonna do this, she thought. Seconds later, Naruto felt a warm liquid being poured onto his snake bite. He cringed for a second when he felt it hit his skin. It stings, he said to Ino, who held his head in her lap. I know, Naruto, but just bear with it, she said as she tried to keep him calm. He did smile a bit. It's nice and warm though, which isn't so bad, he remarked with a grin. Yeah, I'm sure it is, she said with her own grin to humor him. Naruto then sniffed a couple of times. Wait, what's that smell? He asked, recognizing an all too familiar smell. Oh, it's nothing, she said, trying to keep him from looking up. Hey Temari, what kinda stuff is? He was cut off when he looked up and paused as his brain processed what he saw. Temari, what the hell are you doing? He shrieked as he blushed a bright shade of red. Of all the things he was expecting when he looked up, this never even crossed his mind. Temari was on her knees, from the waist down, and she was peeing on him. In fact, she was pissing directly onto his snake bite. The blonde teen blushed a bright shade of red when Naruto watched as she relieved herself on his leg, and there was a dead silence between the three of them as her urinating trickled to a halt. She then got back up and wrapped her skirt back on around her waist. I imagine you have some questions, she said, still blushing bright red from Naruto seeing her urinate on him. You could say that, he replied, still blushing himself. I promise that I'll explain everything once the antivenom does its work and you're well again, she responded. For now, you need to lay down and try to get some sleep so that it will take effect. Tomorrow, I'll answer any questions you want, she promised. Naruto wasn't too sure what just happened, but he did as she suggested and lay down while Ino and Temari exited his hut. That was weird, he thought as his eyes slowly drifted shut. He did notice that it was getting a little easier to breathe again and it wasn't hurting anymore. Maybe there was something to her method of treatment after all. Outside the hut, Temari and Ino walked to the campfire. That was the most humiliating thing I have ever done in my life, ever, she said while still blushing. But what about Naruto? Will he be alright now? She asked her. Just give him overnight and he should be alright, she replied. Now he just needs rest and a chance for the antivenom to take effect, she told her. Both girls sat around the campfire while Naruto slept like a log in his hut. Both girls were just a little disappointed that they wouldn't get to have any meat tonight, but the mangoes, bananas and pineapples were good enough for an evening meal. Soon after that, they would head off to their separate hut to get some sleep as well. Tomorrow, Temari was gonna have to answer some questions and she really wasn't looking forward to that conversation. The next day, Ino and Temari were already at the campfire and having some breakfast when they saw Naruto emerge from his hut and make his way over to them. They were quiet as he took his seat and didn't say anything as he received his morning fruit. Things were a little awkward as they sat, but Temari thought she would go ahead and break the ice. Are you feeling any better, Naruto? She asked him. Much better actually. Yeah, he replied after swallowing a mouthful of mango. I said I would answer any questions you had. I imagine you'd have a few. She asked him. I do. He replied. Let's start with why you were using my leg as a toilet and why that made me feel better. He started. I was using an old-fashioned method of treating the bite of a red-eyes black viper, Naruto, she replied. In the early days of medicine, it was discovered that while the venom is toxic if injected directly into the bloodstream, it's less harmful when ingested. In fact, a person's digestive system actually molds the venom to the person's benefit and actually strengthens their immune system to the venom, she explained. Really? He asked in both disbelief and amazement. That's right, she replied. But they also found that once fully processed through a person's body, their blood or urine can be used as an antivenom. So what I did was gather several other herbs that would strengthen my own resistance to poisons as well as allow me to process what I drink much quicker, found another red-eyes black viper and milked it of its venom before drinking it all down and then, providing the antivenom to your snake bite which was an opening to your bloodstream, she finished explaining. Naruto was quiet for a moment as he processed all that before speaking. So, you were willing to drink snake venom for me? He said, which she nodded. If that's the case, thanks guys, he said with a smile. You both saved my life and I'm grateful to you for that. I wasn't ready to die yet and I'm glad that I can rely on you both to be there for me, he told them. Both Ino and Temari smiled at that. Glad we could help you, Naruto, said Temari. And we're glad that you're alright, said Ino. But are you sure that things won't be awkward from here on out? Temari asked him. I promise, he replied. But let's just agree not to speak of it, he said, which got them all to nod their heads. Anyways, I'm heading to get my fishing gear because we need to stock up on meat. Then I'm gonna work on the new house again, he told them. As Naruto walked off, Temari called out to him again. Naruto, she said, which got him to turn to her. If Ino or I were bitten, would you have done the same for us? She asked him. As strange as it was, yes I would, he answered. You're both my friends and I would have done anything to save you if your lives were threatened, he told them with a confident smile. Do you really mean that? Asked Ino with a smile. Believe it, he replied, which got them both to giggle. As Naruto both wandered off into the distance, both girls watched and couldn't help but feel closer to him now. Neither of them could deny that they really liked him now. But they also looked over to one another, knowing that both felt the same way for the same boy. How were they gonna solve the issue of two girls and one boy? Ino and Temari have quickly become friends since they've landed on this island, but now there was sort of a competition between them for the attention of the same boy. Both girls valued their friendship, but neither were too sure they were willing to share the same boy. Both of them would finish their breakfast and head off to do their chores around the camp. All the while, wondering which one was gonna win Naruto's affections. Naruto was currently working on the new beach house he planned on making for the girls and himself. So far the project was actually coming along quite nicely. The foundation for the house was nice and secure with large and very long poles made up of bamboo driven 6 feet below the sand before he started connecting them together to form a frame. It was gonna be huge too. 20 by 20 so that the three of them would have plenty of room in the house rather than what they were living in right now. It took Naruto a long time to come up with the makeshift ropes out of vines growing in the jungle and the wooden nails he'd used to secure the frame together tightly, but it was well worth the effort and he felt proud of himself when he was finally done with the floor. While Naruto kept working on his own project and started working on the framework for the walls, Ino and Temari were working on their own projects. But this had less to do with building and more to do with their own personal hygiene. Both ladies were grateful that they still had much of their ninja gear with them. They even found some stones good for sharpening so that their kunai knives wouldn't lose their edge. Both ladies were trying to pretty themselves up more, and part of that was being able to shave their legs and their underarm pits. They also developed their own shampoos so that they could keep their hair looking nice after they bathed each morning. Both ladies wanted to try looking and smelling their best because they couldn't deny that they've developed feelings for Naruto. Both of them would find themselves watching him whenever he was around and sure he wasn't looking. They enjoyed watching him work on his various projects like building them all a new house or cooking something he caught over the fireplace for them. Both ladies were genuinely touched that he worked so hard to try and make them feel comfortable while they waited for a rescue team. But it went further than that. Not only were they both growing very fond of the guy, but they've come to find him very attractive too. His 2 years of training with Jiraiya and the manual labor he's been doing on the island have worked wonders on his body. They especially liked the fact that he worked without a shirt on so they could admire his well-built form. His abs and pecs were amazing. But of course, there was a problem now between them. Naruto was the only healthy young male on the island and there were 2 of them. Both Ino and Temari wanted the same boy but weren't too happy about having to compete. A few times in a row Ino would interrupt Temari whenever she made some sort of advances on him, and conversely Temari did the same with the other blonde. Naruto had no clue what was going on with the both of them whenever a fight broke out, but he was kind of scared to get involved. Sakura got pretty hostile whenever she got mad at him, and he always did or said something stupid to make the situation way worse, which usually resulted in him receiving a beating. Sakura was scary enough sometimes, but he didn't wanna risk pissing off either Ino or Temari. And they weren't the only ones who've developed feelings for him either. Naruto had lately found himself fantasizing about getting physical with either Ino or Temari. There were times where he'd be watching them when they weren't looking. He thought Ino had very nice tits and she had a very flat and well-toned stomach. He also thought that Temari had great legs that looked like they went on for days and her was nicely round and firm looking. He also liked that they wore their hair down, which was a new way of seeing them because Ino usually had her hair tied back in that long ponytail with a single bang of hair covering half her face, while Temari had her hair put up in her 4 spiky pigtails. But he thought that they both looked very beautiful with their hair worn in its natural look. At this very moment, Naruto was still working on the foundation of the new house and Temari was sitting by the fireplace again after picking a whole lot of mangoes and pineapples. That was something that she and Ino did often to make sure that their supply of fruit didn't drop too low. She looked over to see him working and her eyes were drawn south to his. She thought that he had a very nice backside and right now she had a front row view of it while watching him work. She also watched when he was lifting heavy loads and her eyes were drawn to the muscles of his arms and upper body, which was almost hypnotizing her. She even licked her lips once when she saw how sweaty he was getting. She was so distracted that she didn't even notice Ino watching her. Enjoying the view? She asked, which startled her. Please don't do that, replied the older blonde, mildly annoyed. I know what you were doing, Temari, said Ino with a smirk. You had some perverted thoughts going through your head while watching Naruto work on the house. I wonder, what were you watching specifically? His biceps? His pecs or abs? How about his? She asked while placing her hands on her hips. That's not what I was doing at all. She tried protesting with a blush on her cheeks. I was thinking that maybe I should offer to help him, she told her. Oh really? So you weren't getting any ideas while enjoying the show, were you? She asked as she noticed that Temari's hands were on her thighs. She was blushing even redder and just stood up and walked away so as not to ember herself anymore. It was then Naruto walked up to grab himself a mango. Hey Ino. He greeted as he took a bite. He watched as Temari walked off and he noticed something off about her body language. What's with her? He asked. Don't worry about it Naruto, replied Ino with a smile. By the way, you're doing a great job with the new beach house, she told him. Oh thanks. He replied smiling. I'm almost done with the foundation so very soon I can begin putting up the walls, he told her. Great. She replied as her eyes wandered down to see his bare chest. She was taking in the full view of his well-built body which she found very appealing. Ino, is something up? He asked her which snapped her out of her trance. Nothing. She squeaked before she turned around and walked away. Naruto took another bite of his mango with a confused look on his face. Temari and Ino have been acting very weird lately, he thought as he headed back to work. Hours later Temari would be doing her part and adding some more wood that she's collected to the campfire. She took a moment to feel the warmth of the flame before she noticed that she was the only one on the beach at the very moment. I wonder where Naruto and Ino have gone, she thought as she took a quick look around. Eventually she thought she'd go out and look for them and headed into the jungle. She would try to steer clear of the hot springs because it was right about now that Naruto would be taking his evening bath. But she noticed something in the distance when she drew near the place where they all took turns bathing. She thought she saw Ino too and what was weird was it looked like she was hiding in a bush. She came in just a little closer but what she saw shocked her. Oh, my God, she said wide-eyed and in complete disbelief. Ino was hiding in a bush and masturbating while watching Naruto bath. That hypocrite, she thought as she watched Ino maging her own and running one of her hands in between her legs. Ino watched through the bushes as Naruto washed his hair and ran his hands over his body, cleaning himself up. She was completely hypnotized by the images of how the water ran down his barren body. She was blushing a bright red while watching him clean himself up. One of her hands traveled to her left while she started playing with her clitoris underneath her dress. Ino had been doing this for a while now, secretly sneaking off to watch Naruto bath and pleasure herself while she fantasized about being intimate with him. She has been secretly scolding herself for behaving this way. If it were the other way around, if Naruto was hiding in the bushes and watching her take a bath while he stroked himself, she'd be furious with him. And yet at the same time she found that idea slightly arousing. She was nearing her end when she felt a cold pair of eyes behind her. She turned around and in horror was standing Temari with her arms crossed and looking down at her. What do you think you are doing? She hissed and looking very pissed off. Temari, she squeaked while turning an even brighter shade of red. What are you doing here? She asked so as not to alarm Naruto. I should be the one asking you that, she shot back. Earlier she was cut off when Ino yanked her down because Naruto turned and only just missed Temari. Ino, Temari, are you around? He asked, waiting for an answer. Well, I'm still using the bath right now so you're gonna have to wait a little longer, he said before he began finishing up. Both girls were crouching down low in the bushes and blushing. That was close, they both thought in unison. Later that night on the beach, Naruto had finished preparing dinner for everyone. This time he caught a couple of birds of a tropical species. He didn't know what kind they were, but they cooked real nicely over the fire and they were small enough so that each of them could have their own little exotic bird dinner. And thanks to Ino and Temari's foraging from earlier, they were able to enjoy their birds with a lovely selection of mangoes, pineapples, coconuts and bananas. Naruto, these are delicious, said Temari as she took another bite of the well-cooked meat. I'll say, replied Ino, who took a drink of water to wash down her food. It's not chicken, but it certainly is delicious, she complimented. I'm glad that you guys like, he said before taking another bite. We've been eating so much fish and pork lately that I thought I'd try finding you all something different, he explained. And as always you don't disappoint, replied Temari with a smile which Ino got a glimpse of. Well, maybe one of these nights, I could try cooking dinner for you Naruto, Ino offered, which earned her a glare from Temari. I mean, you've done so much for us that I think it's the least I could do, she added. Sure, I'd be happy to try anything you make Ino, he replied happily, completely unaware of what was going on between his fellow outcasts. After everyone finished eating, Naruto stood up and stretched. He enjoyed the food, but how he wished he could have a bowl of Ichiraku ramen. Well, I'm gonna head to bed. I've got a lot of work tomorrow because I'm putting the walls of the new house up. I'll see you both again tomorrow, he said, smiling as he walked off to his hut. Both Temari and Ino smiled to him as well, but stopped once they watched him enter his private hut. They then looked to one another with hardened looks. Ino, Temari said as she looked the other blonde in the eye. Temari. Ino replied, looking back the same way. Both were quiet for a few moments before Temari finally broke the silence. Look, we both like Naruto. There's no denying it, she said in a less hostile manner. She was quiet for a moment before responding the same way. And it does seem like this is a problem when two girls like the same boy, she replied. So how do we solve this? She asked her. Naruto was about to lay down in his makeshift bed when he thought he heard something. He turned to see both girls standing at the entrance of his hut. Ino, Temari, is everything alright? He asked them. Naruto, can we please come in? Ino asked him. Naruto nodded his head and watched as both girls walked in, with now all three of them standing in the middle of his hut. Can I help you both? He asked. Neither of them said anything, but Temari came in just a little closer while Ino walked around behind him. I hope we're not bothering you, Temari said as she got dangerously close. No, everything's fine, he replied. But wah, he began when he was cut off by Temari, who leaned in and pressed his lips up against his in a kiss. Naruto's eyes shot wide open when he felt her kissing his lips slowly and romantically while Ino started hugging him from behind, purposely pressing her ass up against his back. Temari brought her arms up to hug him above his shoulders while she kept kissing him, while Ino then started kissing his back and shoulders. Guys, what's going on? He asked in between each of Temari's kisses. We just wanna be with you, Naruto, Temari said quickly before she went back to kissing him. Ino then gently pulled his face back to her so that she could start kissing him too. Please, Naruto, said Ino as she kissed him softly on the lips. Let us both stay with you tonight, she pleaded as she kept kissing him. At this point, both Ino and Temari figured it. We'll just both have a threesome with him. They're both trapped on an island together, they both were feeling lonely and needed the affections of the same man, there were no other people around to judge them, so why the not? At this point, Naruto couldn't hold back either and started kissing them back. Naruto brought his right hand back to gently hold Ino's face while they made out, and his left arm swung around to hold Temari close, now pressing her body up against his and squeezing her ass up against his chest. She held him close and kept kissing his neck and shoulders. Naruto then let out a groan when he felt Ino give him and reach around and started rubbing his now hardening through his makeshift shorts. Ino let Naruto go back to making out with Temari while she reached down to undo his pants and letting them fall to the floor. Naruto didn't wear a shirt anymore, so he was now completely, and she smiled seeing his fine and his 10 in free for them both. Both ladies then had Naruto sit down on his knees while they started taking off their clothing too. Naruto reached around Temari, who let him and felt his hands working on the knot of her makeshift bra. Once the knot was undone, her round and plump ass laid bare for him to see. She blushed but didn't object when he took a second to marvel at her nice tits, and she moaned softly when he started making her the orbs of flesh in his hand while he reached down with his free hand to undo her dress. Behind him, Ino had already finished getting and got down to the other blonde's level. Naruto had finished getting Temari's dress off thanks to undoing the knot by her left him, and she let it completely off, revealing her fully body to him. Naruto was almost blown away by how hot he thought she looked. She then laid back, supporting herself by her elbows, and spread her legs, revealing her now wet to him. Remembering what Ero Sennin taught him about years ago, Naruto climbed up over top of her and lined himself up with her entrance before pushing himself in. Temari let out a yelp of pain from feeling him break her hymen, and Naruto waited for her to adjust before he'd go any further. That's when Ino brought his attention back to her and they started another makeout session. Once Temari had enough time to fully adjust to his girth inside her and the pain had numbed, she brought his face back to her where they started kissing again. Naruto then started ramming his hips forward and thrusting his in and out of her. Ino smiled and hugged Naruto from behind while she watched Naruto Temari. The sight was truly hot and making her wetter and wetter by the second. She brought one of her hands down to start playing with herself while she watched Naruto and Temari have, eagerly awaiting her turn with the boy she liked. Naruto began to pick up the pace, and as he did, Temari's moaning got louder and her wet caverns started growing tighter by the second. It didn't take long before the sound of their flesh slapping against one another was heard loudly. Naruto-kun. That feels so good. Temari moaned as she blushed bright red and brought one arm up to hold him closer to her. Don't stop. Please don't stop, she pleaded. Naruto kept thrusting into her with greater speed and power before he heard her breathing become more erotic and higher pitched. He also felt her really clamping down on his and her womanly fluids gushing out all over their crotches, which meant that she was already coming. Naruto also felt the growing pressure in his groin and knew that he was gonna blow any second. Temari-chan, I'm about to come, he warned. Inside me, she screamed as he kept riding out her orgasm. Are you sure? He shouted back merely seconds from bursting. It's alright, Naruto-kun. I want it. I want you to come inside me, she screamed. Naruto kept thrusting until he finally blew his load within her. Temari let out a loud and long moan as she felt several spurts of his cum squirt inside her body. Once they had both calmed down, Ino, who had been waiting patiently for her turn, brought Naruto's face to hers. My turn, she cooed as she brought his into a loving embrace. Naruto made out with her furiously as their hands roamed up and down their bodies. He groaned into the kiss when he felt her tugging and stroking his in her hand to get him fully aroused again. It didn't take long at all before his erection had returned and was back to full strength. Naruto and Ino were both on their knees as they made out before she was ready. She had him sit down in a lotus position and took a few to let Naruto admire her body. Just like with Temari, Naruto was dazzled by her powerful waist, her flat stomach and her plump and perky s. He also got a great view of her now dripping womanhood, which was starving for his. Ino climbed over top and lined herself up with his before sitting back down and letting him break through her hymen. Just like with Temari earlier, Ino let out a yelp from the pain of losing her virginity and wanted to wait a moment before they continued. Naruto just sat up holding Ino in his arms while he enjoyed the feeling of being inside her soft and warm wet caverns. He then felt someone messaging his back and shoulders and looked back to see Temari smiling at him. She leaned in and started kissing him pianely before Ino finally adjusted and started raising herself up and down and letting Naruto's manhood slip in and out of her. Naruto reacted to Ino by gripping her hips and helping her stay balanced while she practically bounced up and down on his lap, letting him her. Ino was moaning loudly from the movements as he stretched her wide open and reached deep inside her. Ino-chan, you're really clamping down on me here, he shouted as she kept growing tighter and tighter. Naruto-kun, I'm so close, she screamed. Kami, I'm so close, she screamed even louder. Like before, Naruto could feeling the growing pressure in his groin and knew he was about to climax a second time. He kept doubling his efforts to help Ino finish, and before long, her breathing became even more erotic and high-pitched, just like Temari did before. It didn't take long before she was screaming loudly and her womanly fluids started gushing out and soaking their crotches. Ino-chan, I'm gonna come, he warned her as he did before with Temari. Go ahead, Naruto-kun, she said in between gasps. Come inside me, she screamed as her eyes started rolling back. Naruto thrust into a few more times before he let out a loud groan and burst inside Ino. Ino started panting as she felt several spurts of Naruto's cum shot up into her. She then felt Naruto lay her back down so she could rest. Naruto-kun, over here, he heard and turned to see Temari on her knees with her back turned and her hands on the wall of his hut. She smiled seductively and even shook her a little. I want more, she cooed and stuck her butt out just a bit more. Naruto smiled and got up behind her and started stroking himself to bring his erection back to full strength. While Naruto stroked his, he started lightly kissing Temari's neck and shoulders, which got her to moan from his affections. She reached back with one hand to bring his face back to hers so they could begin making out again. Naruto and Temari started a heated battle for dominance with their tongues, and she moaned into the kiss when he re-entered her body. Naruto then started thrusting into her body again. Temari put both her hands on the walls again as Naruto gripped her hips and started pounding away within her. He smiled as he felt his crotch slapping against her cheeks and how they sent ripples through her flesh with each thrust. Temari was already moaning from Naruto's quick and powerful thrusts. Behind them, Ino had recovered from her pleasure high and simply watched as Naruto thrust into her fellow blonde. The sight was really hot, so she started masturbating again as Naruto and Temari continued in front of her. She was gonna have to thank Temari for this brilliant idea of just having a three-way, because this is hotter than any romantic dreams or fantasies she's ever had. Naruto reached around to start playing with and squeezing Temari's tits, which made her moan even louder, and already she could feel the warmth in her stomach from another orgasm fast approaching. Naruto was ramming his hips forward with his sliding in and out of her with inhuman speed. Temari was screaming when she felt the head of his slamming against her cervix. Naruto-kun, I'm gonna come again, she screamed. Me too, he shouted back. And within seconds, both of them climaxed together with Temari's juices leaking down her thighs and Naruto's cum squirting up into her body again in several large spurts. They remained joined at the hip for a second before Naruto leaned in and brought her face to his in another pianate kiss. After their makeout session was over, Naruto let himself slip out of her and she collapsed to her knees to catch her breath. Naruto then turned back to Ino to see if she wanted to go another round. Much to his delight, she most certainly did. Ino was now on all fours and sticking her bare out and inviting him to screw her a second time. Naruto got behind her and started gently massaging her butt while he stroked himself again to bring his erection back. Naruto got a great view of Ino's backside. He plump and cute little laid bare for him, her dripping wet snatch just waiting for him to plow it. Even her anus looked beautiful to him, and that's probably due to Ino and Temari taking such great care of their bodies and staying so clean. Must not have been easy to do when you're trapped on an island, but they managed to pull it off, which was impressive. Once Naruto was fully erect, he lined himself up and pushed back into her body before he started another series of thrusts. Ino let out another pleasurable moan from feeling him really stretch her out and reaching deep inside of her. Naruto gripped her and wasted no time at all in her like he did with her only moments before. Meanwhile, Ino was in heaven as she was plowed like a bitch in heat. As Naruto kept pounding away with his crotch slapping against her bare, Ino called out to him. Naruto-kun, that feels wonderful. That feels amazing, she cried as she was barely able to keep herself up and was resting on her elbows. Ino-chan, you're so incredibly hot and tight. I'm not sure how much more I can take, he said as he kept ramming his into her. From this new angle, Naruto was hitting all the right spots, which were driving Ino absolutely wild with lust and pleasure. It wasn't long at all before she felt the warmth in her belly from another climax fast approaching. Naruto then leaned in with his chest against her back and brought her face to his in another searing kiss. The both of them made out again like before while he kept pounding away inside of her, and they moaned into one another's mouth from the wave after wave of pleasure they felt coursing through their bodies. Naruto then leaned back but gripped her by her elbows while he kept ing her, and this drove Ino completely insane. The pleasure she felt from his screwing her like this was sending shock waves up her spine and into her brain. Naruto-kun, I'm so close. I'm gonna come again, she told him as she was just around the corner from another orgasm. Me too, Ino-chan, and this is gonna be a big one, he warned as he felt the pressure in his loins rising to a dangerous level. Come inside me again, Naruto-kun, she screamed to the top of her lungs. And in a matter of seconds, both of them climaxed together and moaned loudly in unison. Ino's womanly fluids trailed down her thighs and she was panting like a dog when she felt Naruto fire several more large spurts of cum into her body just like before. Naruto then let his slip back out of her, but he laid her down gently onto her side so she could catch her breath. Naruto then felt a pair of hands on his shoulders and he turned to see Temari smiling yet again, which meant she was in the mood for one more ing. She leaned in and started making out with him once more before she guided him over and had him lay down onto his back. Naruto watched her and smiled as she climbed up over top and straddled his waist before leaning down and kissing him once again. Naruto's hands wrapped around her while they made out, and as they kissed, they traveled down until he reached her buttocks and she moaned into the kiss when she felt him give her a good squeeze. She then stopped and sat up and locked down to see he has once again becomes fully erect. Naruto moaned when she reached down with one hand to grab hold of his and start stroking him, which made her smile. She found that she enjoyed having this kind of control over him. Once she was satisfied with stroking him off, she lifted herself up, lined him up with her dripping wet snatch and sat back down and impaling herself onto his long and thick. She then leaned forward a bit and rested her hands on his shoulders while she began rolling her hips forward and moving him around within her. Naruto responded by reaching up and gripping her by her waist to help her keep balanced while he upthrust up into her. Soon she went from simply rolling her hips to bouncing up and down from him thrusting his up into her just like before. "Damn Temari-chan, you are hot," he shouted as he watched her tits bounce and jiggle each time she came back down on him. "You know exactly what to say to a girl, don't you, Naruto-kun?" she shouted back, smirking down at him. Then, much to her surprise, she felt someone reach around her from behind and start squeezing her tits. Temari looked behind to see Ino smiling at her. She was about to say something when Ino cut her off by leaning in and locking lips with her. Temari's eyes were very wide at first as she wasn't expecting a make-out session with Ino, but her eyes slowly drifted closed as she moaned and began kissing her back. This was unexpected but not unwelcome as both blonde teens started battling it out with their tongues for dominance over the other girl's mouth. Naruto was grinning widely as he watched both girls make out. This had to be one of the hottest things he's ever seen before, and this had to be the best night of his entire life. Naruto felt the growing pressure in his groin again and started doubling his speed and power. Temari would stop kissing Ino and soon started moaning even louder as she felt another orgasm fast approaching, and she also felt Naruto twitch inside her, which meant that he was gonna blow another load all over her insides again. Temari was screaming loudly from Naruto-ing her and Ino squeezing her tits until she started coming again with her womanly fluids gushing out onto Naruto's crotch. Naruto himself thrust up into her a few more times before he exploded again and started shooting several more spurts of cum into her body. Temari felt like she was seeing stars as she felt the pleasure high course through her body. And she didn't even notice that Naruto and her mixed cum along with a little of her piss was leaking out of her and down Naruto's shaft. Finally, Temari gently rolled off with Naruto's slipping out and she just lay down on her side breathing heavily, deciding that she was finished for the night. Meanwhile, Ino climbed up and sat where Temari did only seconds before and started stroking Naruto's slick in her hand to bring him back up to full strength. Ino smiled as Naruto moaned from her jerking him off in her hands, and once he his erection back again, she wasted no time lining him up with her dripping and sitting back down, letting him slide into her body a third time. Naruto reached up to take hold of her ass and Ino moaned from the feeling of him squeezing and maging her tits while she rolled her hips over him and felt his slide in and out of her wet and hot. "This feels incredible," Naruto shouted as Ino went from just rolling her hips to bouncing up and down on his hips. "Naruto-kun, you're so long and thick," she moaned as she felt him increase the speed and strength of his thrusts. "You're really stretching me out. It's so tight," she screamed. Naruto kept thrusting up into Ino as quickly and with as much force as he could. Ino was howling from pleasure when she felt the head of his hitting against her cervix, and as he did, she felt herself fast approaching her final climax. Naruto was moaning from feeling Ino's innards becoming tighter and tighter as he kept ing her, and it didn't take long at all before he felt the pressure building up in his groin again. Naruto brought Ino down and locked lips with her yet again, and they moaned into one another's mouths as they were both about to have another combined orgasm. Ino then sat up again and bounced up and down as her breathing became more erotic and high-pitched. She was about to climax again and she knew it, and judging by how Naruto twitched inside her, she knew he wasn't far behind. "Naruto-kun, I'm coming again," she screamed. "Sweet Kami on high, I'm coming again," she cried out. "Me too, Ino-chan," he shouted back to her. "I think this could be my biggest one yet," he groaned. "Give it to me, Naruto-kun. I wanna feel you fill me up," she screamed. Seconds later, Naruto groaned loudly and glued his eyes shut as he exploded within Ino for the final time. When she felt Naruto come, Ino threw her head back and screamed to the heavens as her own orgasm finally hit her like a herd of elephants. Ino's eyes rolled back in her head and a smile formed on her face with tears streaming down her cheeks as Naruto's cum filled her to the brim and their mixed juices now leaked from her and down his shaft. She then rolled over and off of Naruto to enjoy the pleasure high she was in now that she was finally done. Naruto then brought her and Temari in so that they could lay with him. He looked to Temari first, who smiled, and they made out for a couple of moments before she lay her head down on his shoulder. Naruto then looked over to Ino and she leaned in to kiss him too, and after a few moments for making out, she parted lips and lay her head down onto his other shoulder. The three of them were so tired and covered in sweat that they couldn't even lay awake to talk. Instead, they all drifted off to sleep in one another's loving embraces. After a long while of UAL tension building up, Ino and Temari were satisfied with that they got from Naruto tonight and were ready to just call it a night. They figured that they could talk to him about it tomorrow at breakfast. Next morning, Naruto got up and yawned, feeling great. Last night with Temari and Ino was the best thing in the whole world for him. Now he finally understood why Jiraiya was so obsessed with beautiful women. Had to be the greatest thing in the whole damn planet. He got dressed and walked out of his hut to the campfire. There he saw Ino and Temari also already dressed, and it looked like they had breakfast cooking. Naruto-kun, breakfast. Ino called out, gesturing for him to take a seat and eat with them. Temari handed him a nicely cooked fish on a stick, which he accepted. Thanks. He replied with a smile and taking a seat between both girls. They all ate quietly for a while before Naruto finally broke the silence. So about last night, he said, getting both girls to look over to him. I guess it was kind of out of the blue for you, huh? Temari asked him. I didn't have a problem with it at all, no, he said, grinning. But yeah, I wasn't expecting that at all. What made you both wanna come to my hut last night and, well, you know? He asked. Ino reached over and took Naruto by the hand. Naruto, after staying on this island with you for so long, I've come to care for you, said Ino, plain and simple. We both have, said Temari. You've done so much for the both of us, and it didn't take long at all for Ino and I to realize that we really cared for you, she confessed. Wow, I didn't really know what to say, he said, smiling. This isn't unwelcome or anything, I hope, said Ino. No, not at all, he replied, smiling. I care very much for both of you as well, and I thought last night was awesome. And yeah, I've felt something similar for you both over time since we've been here. You're my best friends and I'm glad that we're in this together, he told them. So I take it that it's official then? Ino asked him, smiling. What's official? Naruto asked back. That we're your girlfriends and you're our boyfriend? Asked Temari with a smirk. Naruto smiled back. You bet, he shot back. The three of them would eat together for a little while longer before Naruto decided that it was time for him to start working on the house again. Once he walked off, both Ino and Temari shot one another friendly glances. Perhaps sharing a boyfriend wasn't such a bad idea after all, and they both couldn't wait for what future nights held in store for them. They were both already blushing from idea of future nights with Naruto and how awesome that was gonna be. They could both hardly wait to see where their three-way relationship would lead them.